Paradise. I'm also a Budget Advisory Committee member, and pretty much that's all I live and breathe in this last couple of months. I absolutely love numbers. I adore them, and I'm very nervous that the Budget Advisory Committee is lacking those numbers to make decisions. We've had 7 meetings this past couple of months, 2.5 months, 7 meetings, 14 hours, 2 Budget Advisory Community forums that were decent. I really expected only about 5 people, but the room was pretty darn packed, which was nice. We've got a lot of ideas, but got a lot of questions as well from the community, from the teachers, from the people in the room. There are several people that haven't been able to make the meetings. 6 to 8 p.m. is difficult, very difficult. And I understand that there's been roundtables, which are really amazing, and I think you've got a lot of support on those. We do need to get parents engaged. I don't want to bring the election up, but these are big decisions to make. And if we're in a budget deficit, we do need to educate the community that we are in this situation and what they can do to provide their feedback rather than come out of the woodworks, as they call it, a pebble in their shoe later on down the road complaining after the fact. So I really do want to beef up communication this next couple of weeks and make sure parents are engaged, community's engaged. Last Thursday's meeting, I was really looking forward to it, because we were promised answers to questions, long list of questions at the Budget Advisory Committee Forum. The members have asked the committee members, people in charge of the data. This is 24 slides of a lot of beautiful trend slides, beautiful data, absolutely beautiful data, but we've gone through that before, and it's just regurgitated into pretty slides without real questions answered. Like, we have materials have gone down from year to year, but okay, well, what is that decrease? The same questions that have been asked at previous meetings. So what we have is 3 meetings coming up, 3 meetings before the Budget Advisory Committee members make recommendations to the board. Now, without information about the total expenditures, how is the Budget Advisory Committee members going to make those decisions? It's like whack-a-mole. It's pretty much, you see that thing where we're just plugging holes here and there. That's what's going to happen. We're not looking at the biggest spend items. We're not making good decisions. We have a lot of ideas, and we need help. So I asked the board, talk to me. I'm here every 2 weeks. I am an open book. My phone is always on. Please talk to me. Talk to any of these Budget Advisory Committee members.
Your time's up,
because we're in
Sonia.
trouble. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, next speaker is Diane Cronk. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. I have a teen who's in the general.
Diane, could you get a little closer to the mic? Thank you.
I have a teen who's in the general ed classroom with an aide, and the school, ever since he entered high school, is trying to get rid of this aide. He needs it for a medical condition. He has staring spells. And from talking to other parents, there is no way to keep services or add services without hiring a lawyer. Now, in previous meetings, you talked about not cutting services that would affect students, but you have done that to the special ed students. And I don't know why they're not as important as the general ed kids, but apparently no one cares about the special ed students, and you're cutting services left and right. And the special ed department cares nothing about the students. They only care about the money and cutting services and cutting the budget. And it is really impacting the parents' wallet, for one. Lawyers are very expensive. I myself have spent over $30,000 already, and I shouldn't have to do this just to keep an aide for my son who has a medical condition. Staring spells. I mean, and I've talked to many other parents, and they're all going through the same thing, and they all say the same thing. We can only keep our services if we hire a lawyer. And this is not right. And when you talk to public agencies that deal with the disabled, they all say Morgan Hill Unified School District is the worst district in all of Santa Clara County for special ed services. And this is one of the reasons you don't have people moving down here. They don't want to deal with the school system. Because every year, the special ed student number is going to go up because autism rates go up and ADHD rates go up, and it's not going to change. And I think you also should make it public how much you spend on hiring lawyers to fight parents who have special ed kids, because you spend a lot, and it has never been published anywhere. And it is just not fair to parents to be treated this way. And it's not fair to our students to be treated this way, as if they're garbage throwaway students. When my son has a chance to go to college, but they don't want to provide him his aid, that would make him able to go to college, to get his education. Without the aid, he cannot learn, he cannot function in the classroom. But with the aid, he can function just like any other student and learn. He has a good intelligence, and they seem to ignore that. And they use that fact that he has a brain to take away the aid. Oh, he doesn't need an aid because he's not dumb. But he has these staring spells, and he needs the aid for that. And it shouldn't be based on his intelligence. It should be based on his need. And I think you should not let the special ed team cut services just to meet what you want to propose for their budget. That's just going to go up every year for special ed.
Thank
The
you,
rates of
Diane.
autism and everything goes up every year.
Thank you, Diane. Your time's up.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Pamela Meador.
I was not speaking in general comments. Okay.
All right, thank you, my mistake. All right, so we'll now move on to communications. Student Board Member Faruqi, your report, please.
Well, that was my report for what's happened in the past few weeks and what's coming up. So for Sobrato, they're having their SAT today. They actually had their SAT today. And they're having their HOCO, their homecoming is coming up next week. They have their homecoming rally on the 30th. Their food fair is also on the 30th, so come to that. I'm sure it'll help them a lot. And homecoming is on November 1st for Sobrato. And their band and color guard took first place in the Go Work competition. So congratulations to them. For Live Oak, they had their award ceremony today. They had a lot of ceremony students who participated in the ceremony. They actually had to be split in two because there were so many students. So awesome on that. They're having their college fair tomorrow. And the Emerald Regime for Live Oak High School took second place for the same Go Work competition. And First Robotics program at Live Oak is having their upcoming Sacramento Regional competition this weekend. Jackson had a spirit day last Friday. They also had their principal chat last Friday, and they had their middle school dance last week. And their fall and music concert is coming up this Friday, and they're having their Halloween parade and a fun run on the 31st. Burton Middle School had their fall band concert on the 10th, and they also had a young youth mariachi concert on the 12th, and they're having their fall social this Friday. And the list of students here are students who won Student of the Month for October at Burton, so congratulations to them. For San Martin Gwen, they had their book fair last week. They had Breakfast Buddies last Thursday. They have their Halloween parade coming up on the 31st, and they have their musical coming up on this Thursday and Friday. Musical the musical. And for El Toro, they're having their fall festival this Friday. They have their chats with the principal next week on the 30th, and they have their Halloween parade on the 31st. Central High School had their principal coffee chat last Friday, and Martin Murphy had coffee chats with parents. They're having it this Friday, and they also had their fall dance this Friday. Barrett Elementary School is still holding Parent University every Wednesday, and they had their Project Cornerstone meeting last Friday. And for those who don't know what that is, it's basically a group of volunteers come to the school, and they have this theme book for the month, I believe, and they teach it to the students, and they go over the literature of it and so on. and they had their Apex fundraiser. They're having it next week and the week after that. It's over 2 weeks. And they have their Trunk or Treat Halloween event on the 30th. And PA Walsh is also holding the Trunk or Treat event this Friday. Paradise Valley is holding their Fall Festival this Friday, and Nordstrom Elementary is holding their Halloween Parade on the 31st. And Los Paseos, they had a family night out at Chick-fil-A on the 17th, last Thursday, and they're having their College Spirit Week this week. And they're also holding the Trunk or Treat event on the 30th and having their Halloween Parade the next day on the 31st. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Student Board Member Faruqi. We'll now have reports from the superintendent and staff.
Thank you so much, President Escoto. Here's a brief review of, since our last meeting. I attended the Healthier Kids Foundation. Trustee Horner, you attended with me as well. I am a board member on the Healthier Kids Foundation, and our own director, Swift, was in one of the videos where they highlighted our dental clinics and how the dentists come and check our kids' teeth. And so thank you, Director Swift, for representing our partnership with the Healthier Kids Foundation. Also, we had a grand opening. Thank you to the Edward Boss Prado Foundation. This was the Off the Rack. Cecilia Ponzidi and the Edward Boss Prado Foundation donated a washer and dryer, among many other things. And several trustees were there, and so it was lovely to participate in the ribbon cutting for this great new program. I also participated in the Living Above the Influence, the Lati Community Resource Fair. This was a Saturday where there were about 10 things happening all at once, and I wish I could have cloned myself. But at this resource fair, I was able to address the community, and I extend the congratulations to the Student Services team who was given an award from Lati. We also, in the picture in the top left, is one of our students who gave a testimonial. And so that was lovely as well to see. We held our parent district roundtable meetings. We hold, I believe that it's important to offer parents multiple opportunities to engage. And so we have one session in the morning and a repeat session in the evening to accommodate parents who are working. Also on Saturday, the same day as the Lati Community Resource Fair, was the Mariachi Festival, and so I'd like to officially thank the Kiwanis and also Kathy Napoli, who spearheaded this wonderful event, and I am incredibly jealous that we don't have mariachi, and so I've been engaging with both of our dual immersion schools and seeing if we could pull something off, maybe an after-school opportunity, et cetera. And so hopefully for next year, we'll have our own mariachi participate in the festival. Also that Saturday was the Live Oak Parade, the homecoming parade, and so I was able to be there as well. And I also participated, I didn't participate, but I went to the football game. That was most impressive. Student Board Member Faruqi, did you go to the homecoming game?
Fortunately, I did not. I was busy that day.
It was a 35-0. It was a complete shutout. And during halftime, there were fireworks. And so it was most impressive. It was just the most impressive game. Also, congratulations. This past week was the week of the school administrator, and we have one principal here. So Principal Sutton, thank you so much for everything that you do, as well as all of our school administrators. We are continuing our data chats with our principals, and the purpose of these data chats is to look at the quantitative data points and ensure that our students continue to succeed, and we create some just right next steps for those students. I also participated on the Morgan Hill Art Symposium as a panelist. This was, I'll go to the next slide. Oh, it didn't make it to this presentation. But in another version of the presentation, I had one of the slides that I presented to the community, and it's essentially what the school district is doing to contribute to the Morgan Hill art ecosystem. If you have not heard, Colibri Art is now turning into the Eads Hall. And so there are some amazing philanthropists and amazing artists in our community, amazing benefactors who are wanting to create Morgan Hill, especially downtown Morgan Hill is the art mecca of South County of sorts. I also participated at the YMCA's Breakfast of Champions, and our own Jacqueline Snyder, she's our supervisor of student services. She was honored as a champion, and so it was lovely to congratulate her. And student board member Faruqi mentioned the awards assemblies, and so I was able to give you a hug and congratulations. You were one of the many students who received an award. And this concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent Garcia. We'll now move to hear reports from our employee groups. The Morgan Hill Classified Employee Association, as well as the Morgan Hill Educational Leaders Association, will not be providing reports tonight. However, President Jim Levis is here from the Federation of Teachers. Hello, Jim.
Good evening, President Escoto, trustees, Superintendent Garcia, staff, and guests. I am Jim Levis, the proud president of the Morgan Hill Federation of Teachers. As you are all aware, our Aetna insurance members were facing an 82% increase in their rates for the coming year. If this were to have happened, most, if not all, of those members would have struggled to support themselves to pay for their medical coverage at the same time. The amount of stress and worry that not only Assistant Superintendent Colvera Chang's team experienced, but also our MHFT office staff fielded was understandable and immense, and something had to be done quickly. I would like to extend a thank you, there you are, Colvera, to Colvera Chang, Josephine Lamvo, and Tracy James for working with such urgency. I would also like to thank Mahela President Patrick Buxer and Masia President Cheryl Vandeventer. Together, we were able to ensure lower rates for all employees as we transition to the California Schools Voluntary Employees Benefits Association, known as VEBA. I ask that the board vote to adopt Agenda Item H3, the resolution of participation this evening. On a final note regarding this topic, as quarterly health and benefit meetings for MHF team members are a contractual right, I expect that the district will continue to host meetings so that all employees are educated about and involved in the decisions being made related to their health care. I would also like to speak this evening on the topic of the Budget Advisory Committee. With 3 meetings left until the recommendations from the committee to the board, MHFT office staff has a growing concern for the lack of answers to our and the community's questions. As previously brought up during both Budget Advisory Committee forums, our community members and educators have asked for clear breakdowns and explanations of all district revenues and expenditures, as without these, they cannot begin to recommend where cuts should be made. These questions and concerns were echoed again by the Budget Advisory Committee at the meeting on October 17th. The need for this detailed information is why I reached out to Colvera Chang on September 16th with follow-ups on October 3rd and October 15th, requesting the budget breakdown meetings that have been a long-time staple in this district, except for the past few years. It had always been a practice under both Bonnie Tognazzini and Kirsten Perez that representatives from all bargaining groups, along with designated board members, would go over the budget line by line over the course of 2 days, asking questions and getting answers then and there. I am hopeful that this type of transparency can return to our district so that myself, my members, employees from the other 2 bargaining units, and the greater community can feel confident that they are truly included in the decisions being made. This is crucial now more than ever. Lastly, I'd like to discuss the motion on the agenda tonight to censure Trustee Gardner for her actions in one of our members' classrooms last April. It is incredibly disappointing to have it confirmed through an independent investigation that all allegations leveled against Trustee Gardner were substantiated. It is unacceptable for a trustee to take advantage of their role and abuse their power to criticize, disrespect, and demean MHUSD students in their learning environment. As educators, it is of the utmost importance to us to cultivate a classroom community in which all students feel empowered to learn, which starts with them feeling safe to learn. For Trustee Gardner to violate this space, to question student work and student patriotism, and to share their work with community members without their consent or the consent of their parents is reprehensible behavior for a member of this board. As MHFT president, I represent all the certificated educators in this district, and I want it to be clear that this issue is beyond one individual teacher. It extends to all of us. It is about respect for our work, the safety and privacy of our students, and the ability for them to develop their critical thinking without being shamed. As educational professionals, we work each day to build learning environments and provide learning experiences that enrich our students' skills and encourage our students' growth. We should not have to worry about guests in our learning environments negatively impacting our students' learning experiences, especially a district representative and elected official. Trustee Gardner's behavior is of concern. I hope that this process assists her in learning from it. I ask that you all vote tonight as if this had occurred in your classroom and to your students. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you, President Levis. We'll now move on to board reports. Colleagues? Trustee Montes?
Thank you, President Escoto. Just a brief update, colleagues. Last night, we had a DLAC meeting. I was joined there by Dr. Jimenez and Director Sapian. We had a training for our DLAC members. They reviewed Robert's Rules of Order, which they shared positive feedback on. They also shared great suggestions in terms of how we might be able to disseminate information about upcoming meetings to parents who are parents of students identified as English language learners who are also interested in attending the DLAC meetings, but not officially there in a role capacity. They also received their copy of the English Learner Master Plan. They received some tarea, some homework to review that and bring back feedback to which we will discuss at our upcoming DLAC meeting. And it's super exciting. This is just great. Tremendous gratitude for all the efforts in bringing that forward.
Thank you, Trustee Montes. Anyone else? Trustee Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. I appreciated having the chance to attend one of the community forums for the Budget Advisory Committee. As board members, we try not to attend Budget Advisory Committee meetings, as that's the work of the committee, but the community forum was of great interest to me. I attended the second forum at Live Oak High School in the library, and the things I was pleased to see were, number one, the number of people there. I think Ms. Bennett referred to the packed room, which was great. I know that one of our MHFT executive council members provided Chipotle dinner to all of the members that were there for a previous meeting and stayed on for the community forum, which was great, a great incentive. And then we had that great brain power in the room, which was terrific. The other thing that I saw, which reminded me a lot of the process that we went through in 2017 and 2018, were the number of ideas that were written by many different members of the public. I saw all manner of folks, from parents to non-parent community members that were present, as well as our educators and other staff writing furiously ideas, such that multiple flip chart pages had to be pulled out. So much like my experience under previous administration, when we were right-sizing the budget 2017, 2018, I saw the community come out with some really good ideas, very specific ideas, which I'm eager to see more of. And in that process, 7 years ago, we were able to actually right-size our budget. So I do remain hopeful that that can happen again. I also heard questions, and thank you for raising that, both Mr. Levis and Ms. Bennett. Thank you, Mr. Chang, who was present at the community forum to lend leadership and to lend a listening ear. So I appreciate your leadership on this, Assistant Superintendent Chang, and I'm confident that we will continue to be able to provide the answers as we can to the many questions, and also put together some of these fantastic ideas that are coming out of our community, as well as from what I hear from the roundtables. So thank you all.
Thank you, Trustee Patterson. Vice President Altman.
Thank you. I did get to go to the roundtable, the evening roundtable, at least the first part of it, and there was a decent turnout of parents and definitely of administrators. Colleagues, I have a conflict on October 29th, Safety Committee meeting, and I have a conflict with that, so if anyone is willing to step up and jump into a Safety Committee meeting till I'm available, it should be about an extra half hour.
Oh, I'm your backup.
I really want to go, but I can't.
Colleagues, help us out.
What time?
It starts at 3:30, and I think I'll be available by 4.
Oh,
And
we
what
just
day?
need half an hour?
What day is that?
It is on Tuesday, the 29th.
Tuesday.
I'm available if no one else wants it.
Thank you, Trustee Horner. I'll be in contact
Trustee
with you
Okay.
with more information and how we can handle the
29th
switch.
at 3:30?
3:30
Okay, just put that on.
via Zoom. And yeah, to piggyback on Trustee Patterson's comments, I've gone through several right-sizing, downsizing, budget cuts, whatever you want to call it, through the years. One thing that I really found valuable that I'm hoping that our community will have an opportunity to participate in is a prioritization. Once the brainstorming's done, to be able to prioritizing. It's a lot easier to give input that way rather, you can brainstorm a gazillion brainstorms. But then when it comes down to the actual business of what's most important, that I'm hoping there will be a chance for people to weigh in on that.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Horner?
Thank you, President Escoto and colleagues. Yeah, a few things have been going on. Some have already been mentioned. Just the policy subcommittee did meet. I want to thank our newest trustee, Northrop Gaddis, for jumping in with both feet and making significant contributions right off the bat. Pleasure to have you in the room and working on that. And I think those recommendations will be coming at our November meeting, the outcome of that board referrals and items from CSBA. And then also I want to mention the monthly Santa Clara County School Board Association Lunch and Learn happened, I think, just this last week. It's a monthly Zoom meeting, and the topic was the new state law and practice around cell phone use on campuses. And kind of, the law is requiring us to make policy. I don't think they're requiring us to do exactly certain actions, but a lot of school districts are going kind of all in on no cell phones for students during the day. One of the presenters was Danielle Cohen. She's a trustee with the Cambrian School District, and talked about how they've, over the last 2 years, implemented Yonder, which is a pouch-type device that your cell phone goes in, and kind of when you come on campus during the school day, it's kind of locked to close. If there's an emergency, like there can be a signal to unlock it, and then when you leave, it's unlocked. So they've offered tours to come, visit and see how that works for any interested administrators or others. I've mentioned that to Dr. Garcia, so I'm not saying what we should or shouldn't do, just in an information gathering and sharing mode. Also had the opportunity to once a year go spend a lot of time with our Key Club students from Sobrato. That's with my Kiwanis advisor, or actually chaperone hat on. It's one long weekend and then a long day, once an overnight camp, and then the next weekend they did their rally. But just a wonderful time, and it's delightful spending time with these students, because actually as the adults we do nothing. I say we're the guardrails. We're like the guardrails on the highway. When all goes well, nothing touches us. We don't do anything. We're just there just in case. And both of these events were like that. These are just amazing students doing amazing things. They organize the whole program through. It's a region-wide. These are big deals, but it's all student-led, student-organized, student-implemented, and we're there, just basically to drive the vehicles and be the guardrails. So really a great experience. Also had the chance to go along with our board president to the County Office of Education Teacher Recognition. I think that was just last night. Seems that it's all blending together, but always a wonderful event, hearing so many great things about great teachers all throughout our county, including our Ms. Grounds, who just retired as our food teacher at Live Oak, but she was duly recognized, so I think she's on vacation somewhere. So she wasn't able to be there, but we cheered for her just the same. And then today was the Live Oak Awards ceremony. Wonderful to be at. Some great students, particularly this one here. But, and I'll just say again, it's just been such a joy this year every time I've had a chance to be on any of our campuses. The work the administrators, the students, the teachers, the staff, the custodians, everybody is doing. Just as I've been saying, the vibe and feel this year is the most positive I've felt in a long time. Now, no disrespect to what's in the past, but something all y'all are doing is really working. That doesn't mean everything's perfect. There's a lot of people involved, but just so impressed with what it's like to be. Dr. Garcia and I, had time between the award ceremonies today. We popped in a few classrooms, unplanned and unannounced, and it was just a wonderful experience everywhere we went. So just my thanks and compliments to the literally thousands of people that make that happen. It's wonderful. And then the last thing I'll mention, we had a subsection of the Legislative Action Committee met with Assemblymember Alex Lee. He's a fascinating Assembly member, and his focus has long been on social housing, deep structural issues around housing costs and housing availability in this country, and what we do differently than some that are doing better. So that's his area of focus. But much of the conversation, we were there there were 6 of us as school board trustees from all different districts, really recognizing that all these issues overlap. A student that doesn't have secure housing and food and dental and healthcare, well, why aren't you doing well on your reading assignment? So everything affects everything, and as we see it in our world, our McKinney-Vento students, our federally designated homeless students, have more than doubled over the last handful of years, primarily due to economic pressures. So it was a very interesting discussion amongst all of us, and from a point of view of who can be what part of what piece of the solution, and quite different from there's a traditional, it's like, okay, schools, you do academics, county, you do mental health, city, you do housing, and that model is not working. So a lot of discussion about how to further collaborate and cooperate. And Member Lee, one of his, he says, well, Santa Clara County, you all are kind of ahead of your state association because they want to stay focused in a different way. So it's a really interesting dialogue, which will continue. But I firmly believe, we can't do everything, but we have to always look for what part of what solution do we have to offer. So thank you very much.
Trustee Horner, could you add just one more item, and that's the presentation of the check?
Oh, yeah, I ran out of room. Yeah, so as part of the Education Foundation, 3 of us managed to go to the Sobrato Band concert the other night, which was an amazing concert, and hand over the check from the foundation to support scholarships for students in that program to make sure they could go on band trips even when financing is difficult. And we have 4 more such things that need to be scheduled, and that board will be meeting tomorrow to work out the rest of those details. And then also in that vein, we have the big fundraiser being put on by MOHI. That's this weekend, right? The proceeds of which will go through the foundation to support the culinary arts programs in our schools, which is focused at Live Oak at the moment. And we hope to make that an annual significant fundraiser, not only for the Live Oak program, but to build it out elsewhere. And we're looking to our other industry clusters around the community saying, okay, TAG, you're it. What about the arts? What about technology? And really, that's the hope and the vision, to get these different sectors that have a focus on a particular area. It's like, hey, you gotta put some of your effort into supporting our students. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Horner. Colleagues, any other comments? Reports? All right, we're going to move on to G5, calendar upcoming events. Those are included in your packet. And from there, we're going to move to H1, empowering student success and analysis of assessments, early literacy, dual immersion, and biliteracy. Assistant Superintendent Jimenez will introduce and present this item alongside the Educational Services Department staff.
Thank you. It's our pleasure to be here tonight and to share a little bit about our data results and assessments and the work that an incredible team of people are doing every day to make outcomes for students a reality. So I'm going to ask my team to come up here because we're going to tag team this, and I do appreciate your patience as we worked really hard to give you a succinct presentation, but there is so much good work going on in our district, and we wanted to highlight that for all of you today. So I'm going to ask, Kelly, do you mind going to the next slide, please? Thank you. So in your last theme study session, Jessie Swift, Director Swift, came and talked a little bit about the MTSS triangle, right? And so if you recall from that presentation, she did a really great job presenting, we have an academic instruction, a pyramid, right? And the way that we think about supporting students. She focused on the behavioral instructional side and talked about all the wonderful programs and services that we have to support that welcoming, positive school climate and culture that every single one of our staff members is working day in and day out to make sure kids feel welcome on our campus. Today, we have the privilege to come before you and share a little bit about the other side, right, which is the academic and instruction component. And then if you can go to the next slide, Kelly. So one of the things that is recurrent in everything we do is our vision and mission statement, which I know sometimes we put sort of like on a shelf, but for us, it really delineates and anchors our commitments and our values. And so we return to these pretty often to be able to think about who we are as an organization. And the next slide has, just for a gentle reminder, right, and sort of anchoring our conversation today, our current new LCAP goals that are related to achievement, which is goal 1. And what I wanted to highlight, just remind those people who are joining us via Zoom, all of you who received the presentation on the LCAP, is that we have sub-goals or focus goals on each of these goals because we are a very inclusive organization and district, and we think about really strategically about how to address the needs of each of those grade level bands, whether it's elementary, middle school, and high school. And so we were very deliberate in the construction of our LCAP to make sure that all of our students are included in those goals. And if you can go to the next slide. So one of the things that I think, as I presented to all of you before, is that sometimes when we do these presentations, we talk about the assessment and then we talk about next steps and then here's what we're doing. What we decided to do is do it a little bit different and kind of give you that space at the very front so that hopefully tonight we can paint a weave or a picture of the different tiered supports. And so we really want to thank again, we're all Team Crystal. We're all going to wear shirts the next time. She doesn't want us to, but she created this great graphic because we really wanted to show the initiatives, the hard work of all of our educators, right, in the district, really thinking about those multi-tier systems of support and which of those supports are targeted district-wide, right? So you'll see that lift there, and those are really heavy weights when you're trying to increase student outcomes and being really thoughtful and systemic and intentional about what we do in our district. And then some of those things that we have there that are listed for elementary, and then the things that are listed and focused in secondary. So we wanted to include that up front so that as we are going back and forth and saying, you know, here's the assessment and here's what we're doing, right? There's a nice weave as to how those fit into each of those items. And so I'm going to turn it over to my better half to talk a little bit about the next slide.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a slide on improvement science, and there's lots of different people who research improvement science. However, there's a quote here from John Hattie, and it points out that systemic change often takes 5 or more years, and most people expect results in 1 or 2 years. And so that's something to be mindful of when we're trying out new initiatives or bringing in new practices, that in order for the school system to change, we're looking at 5 or more years. And improvement science really emphasizes the importance of systematic, continuous improvement and constantly using those new strategies. Next slide, please. So you may or may not be familiar with this graphic. It's the acronym, because we love acronyms, is PDSA, so Plan, Do, Study, Act. And it's basically a visual for the process of testing and learning. So we look at the data that we have, we make a plan of our most informed ideas of how we can make an impact. We test it out in a small group to see if it's working. Then we study the results. Did it work? Do we need to tweak it? What other adjustments need to be made? And then we can move forward with continuing to expand the practices that are successful. So it's important to note that small iterative changes accumulate into lasting systemic change. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight may be only happening in some schools or grade levels because we want to make sure that it's successful before we expand. And so we want to make sure that we are thinking strategically to set the table so that our changes have a long-term impact on our students and our system. Next slide, please. Another piece of information to help us set some context for tonight is around English language development. And it is important to note that it can take between 4 to 7 years for students to learn English. And so when you're looking at that table on the right, it's a projection of how language is typically acquired, the rate at which it is acquired. So the first row under English language proficiency where it says year 1, if a student comes in at that emerging English level in year 1, as you follow the table across, by year 6 or 7, we would expect that student to be proficient. By the same page, if you go down to the bottom row on that top half where it says year 1 is in column 4, if that student comes into our system and they already have a strong understanding of English, we would expect that they would reclassify very quickly. The reason why this table is important is because it draws a parallel between students' English language proficiency on the top half and their academic achievement on the bottom half. So we know that if students are still acquiring English, they may not be able to demonstrate their knowledge as readily on a test in English. So we understand that their scores may not be as representative of their knowledge, and we have that projection of when we would expect to see them reach proficiency on other assessments that's correlated with their vertical English language proficiency. So we're good. Okay. All right, and I'm going to turn it back over to Deanna.
Thank you, Julie. We really appreciate it. So the next 2 slides, and we wanted to take this opportunity, as Julie said, to kind of set the table, right? A little bit of the context as we're looking at programs and data. This is the chart that you've probably seen in the past. Our wonderful staff have certainly seen it. We launched last school year and this August PD talking about the 5 dimensions. So last year, staff and leadership went on a journey on the 5 dimensions. They did a lot of instructional rounds, they gathered data, and they collected feedback from staff. And so we went on this journey together so that we could, as Julie said, and we were talking about the science of improvement, this is a big undertaking to talk about the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning. So if you go to the next slide, Kelly, at the end of last school year, based on the feedback, the data, the conversations, the lens that we are going to be focusing on for this school year is about student engagement. That's what we want to leverage and really have those deep conversations, both as we're talking about the data chats with principals, but as we're doing walkthroughs and as we're looking at instruction across the district. And I won't read you all of the questions there, but we wanted to make sure that you had a little lens as to when we're talking about student engagement. It is about the quality of the intellectual work. It is about the metacognitive of the students, where students have an opportunity to think about their own thinking. It's about offering students choice. So it is a wide array. And we started the conversation last year about student engagement, and this year, as our teachers engaged in that professional development on August 12th, they also took a deep dive into student engagement and really thought about the ways that they were preparing their classrooms to receive students. And they also engaged in one of the other dimensions because a lot of our teachers were eager to create those classroom climate and culture processes as well. So these are the elements that kind of set the table before we jump into our programs and our assessments. And if you can go to the next slide. Now, we are not as, I'm going to throw this out to Jesse, right, our director, who had to remember fact and myth. I still have that sign in my office, so we were a little bit less interactive. But we do want to give you an opportunity, because it is a study session, to maybe talk to your partner at this moment. And what kind of wonderings do you have as we're setting the table and kind of have this foundation before we jump into our data and programs? So I'm going to give you a minute so that you can talk to somebody and have the time to, as we nicely call it, kind of chunk and chew and process, right? So I'm going to let you do that, and then I'm going to call you back.
Chunk and chew.
It does. It sounds like, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking caramel. Chunk and chew. And my favorite is so, you know, when you say teachers, maybe I might have to do something. Yeah, wherever there's a risk of that. For me. I'll get you a handicap. You can get very
All right, about 10 seconds. I'm going to ask you to wrap up that thought with your neighbor. That was a little more than 10 seconds. I'm going to call you back. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with someone and have a conversation about wonderings that you have as we prepare to dive into the presentation.
All right.
All right. Will anybody like to share from our trustees or our staff a little bit about your wonderings as we prepare to look at data and programs based on some of the table setting that we just did?
Anyone? Were you reaching for that?
No.
To see?
It's like my questions will come later. All right. Well, it's a good time. It's good to have a brain break, right? And sort of be able to process. We understand that this information is dense and we want it. But on the other hand, like I said at the beginning, we wanted to do justice to the incredible work that staff is doing every single day, right? Day in and day out on behalf of our students. So I'm going to turn it over now for the next slide to.
All right, and so as Deanna was sharing, we have been focusing on the 5 dimensions in student engagement and specifically around student talk. And so we're going to start today off talking about the relationship between language and literacy. And so we know that literacy actually starts with talking. So when students are able to verbally express their ideas and have conversations about them, that's what starts getting them into the literacy component. And so it starts off with phonemic awareness and the ability to hear sounds. Then it moves into phonics. Can I match the sounds to letters? And then it starts transitioning into comprehension for informational and literature. And so we want to make sure that we kind of keep that in mind as we're looking at our students' data, as we're planning for instruction, and being able to pinpoint where it is that students really need that targeted support, right? Are they at the beginning with phonemic awareness, or are they more towards the comprehension side? And so that's constantly the lens we have when we're looking at our data. Next slide, please.
Good evening. So we've arrived at the data portion of our night. And so Kelly, do you mind moving forward? So first things first, what you'll see tonight is the presentation broken up into buckets. So we're going to go through all of our ELA, our English Language Arts data. We'll shift over to math, and then we will discuss science. And so when we say CASP is really an umbrella term for all of these assessments that are listed before you. So we have the SBAC that is taken by all of our 3rd through 8th grade students, and then 11th graders. The LPAC, which is taken by every single one of our students that are identified as English learners. The CSA, which is the California Spanish Assessment, that is an optional assessment. It is only available for those students in 3rd through 8th grade or in high school. And so we will look at some of that data with the caveat that SMG was the school that participated in that assessment. And then CAST is our statewide science assessment. And that is taken by 5th, 8th, and then for us, it's 11th graders in high school, but it's once in high school. So Kelly, do you mind moving forward? So as I mentioned, the first bucket is going to be our ELA bucket. And so when we're looking at this assessment, the students are assessed in 4 different areas: reading, writing, listening, research, and inquiry. So there's a multiple choice section of the test, there's a writing test, and there's a listening section. And so all of these areas are addressed through that. And then if we can, next slide, please. So this is what our district looks like overall in terms of ELA. So you'll see that overall, we're looking at about 45% have met or exceeded standards. Right below that, you'll see the growth from last year, which is almost 2%, 1.9%. And then what we've done is we've broken this down by student groups. So we've got our socioeconomically disadvantaged students that grew by 5.5%, almost 5.6%. And I will say that we have that would be about 44% of our student population would qualify under that student group. And then so forth. Reclassified our English learners that struggled a little bit. We're about 1.8% for that. Our migrant ed students, we do have a growing and thriving migrant ed program. They're almost 3%. And then our African American students that grew by 10.3% compared to last year. And so what this shows us is obviously, right, there's still work to do, but we are seeing encouraging trends, especially in light of what Julie just mentioned, where you're on a trajectory over 5 years. And so year 3, we're starting to see the results of the work that has been, you lay the foundation over the last 2 to 3 years, and we're starting to see that come forward in terms of results. The student groups we also brought forward are in alignment with our LCAP goals. If you recall, the metrics in the LCAP goals, we set pretty aggressive metrics with our student groups because we know that there's a gap there. And so in order to catch them up, they have to perform better, right? They have to grow faster than students not in those student groups, right? For example, our students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, in order to catch up, they have to grow faster than, say, the overall group. And so this is in alignment with our LCAP goals as well. Next slide, please. And so what we've also done is looked at our CASP cohort data. So what this does is it follows our third graders from last year, well, third graders from 2 years ago that were fourth graders last year, and how did they do, right? Because now you're looking at apples to apples versus apples to oranges. And so what we've seen is growth in terms of 3 through 8. 11th grade is a lot harder to do because remember, they do only take the test in 11th grade. There's no 10th grade data to compare to. So you'll see gains of 5%, 6.4%. 6th to 7th grade, you'll see 7.7%. We did have a dip from 5 to 6. What we are finding in our data across the district, and you'll see that, is those transition years are incredibly difficult for our students. 5th to 6th, 8th to 9th. That is something that we are continuing to focus on. Our freshman connection, our middle school connection. Those are, as was mentioned previously, those are little crumbs that we're trying to build up, right? Programs that we're trying to bring forward in order to help with the transition years. And then obviously what's going on, supporting our teachers and our students in the classroom.
May I ask a question particular to
Yes.
that? Well, just so I don't forget, we'll get all this through. So 5 to 6, you mentioned the transition. That's interesting because we have some K-8 schools.
Yes.
And we have traditional elementary to middle schools. And I wonder if you're seeing the same 5-8 trend at the K-8s as the how much is the transitioning to a different setting and how much is just the rigor of the grades?
Yeah.
I know you can get that data. I don't know if you have it, but that's.
Yes.
Since we happen to have both models here,
Yes.
that's an interesting question.
It is. We have looked at the data. I don't have it handy right now, but I will say that even within the K-8s, there's a dip. It's less so, however. What we see, obviously, 5th, right? You've got one teacher. 6th, now you're making the jump to 6 classes, right? And then same thing happen even from 8th grade to 9th grade, right? You would still make the transition, new school, new social environment, a lot of that. So there's still a dip within the transition, but it's less so, and that could be a lot of sort of social factors going on. That's a huge thing for our middle schoolers, right? That sort of social net. And so I don't have it handy, but we have looked at it. Yeah.
I don't know what it means, but it's interesting.
Quite interesting. Yes, it's fascinating. Kelly, do you mind moving forward, please? So the California assessment, we will look at the ELA portion of the data, but before we dive into that, just want to set the runway for this. This is an assessment that is taken, it's an alternate assessment to the SBAC assessment that I mentioned earlier. It is really only for students who have a cognitive disability that really prevents them from taking that multiple choice, writing an essay, sort of listening test. This is a one-on-one test that is typically given by the case manager that really knows the students, because you need to be able to interpret the response of the student. Obviously, there are guidelines, you are trained for it, but it's very individualized. And so with that said, these are our ELA CAW, we say CAW because we like acronyms around here, for this test. And so you'll see 23.81. I would like to point out that this assessment is, the results are displayed differently from the SBAC. You don't have an exceed or meets standards. There are 3 levels. There's limited understanding, which is level 1, level 2 is foundational understanding, and level 3 is understanding. And so that 23.8% is what our students have reached, the percentage of students that have reached level 3. And I think it's important in terms of context, we had 21 students take this district-wide. So it's a very small subset of students that participate in this exam. All right, I will hand it off to my colleague who's going to talk about iReady.
All right, so this is our iReady reading data from last year, and it is comparing Diagnostic 1 from the beginning of the year to Diagnostic 3 at the end of the year. And the top bar is Diagnostic 3. You can see there's more green in the top bar compared to Diagnostic 1, the bottom bar. But something that's of interest is if you look at the triangle at the bottom where it's listing intensive, targeted, and universal, our goal is to move more of our students into the universal level. That means that they are accessing grade level class instruction. And between Diagnostic 1 and Diagnostic 3 last year, the intensive went down 13%. Targeted went down 7%, and universal went up 20%. So students are moving in the right direction. Next slide, please. And then this is the beginning of the year diagnostic for grades 1 through 8. And at this point in the year, it's not unexpected to have students in the yellow because it's assessing their readiness at the end of the year. So we want to make sure that those students are moving out of the yellow by diagnostic 2, but it's not cause for concern at the beginning of the year. Next slide, please.
So this year, our high school is piloting the iReady for 9th through 12th grade. So currently, we're testing all 9th through 12th graders in English language arts. When we get to the math portion, we'll talk to you a little bit about what's the recommendation for iReady for that. So this is their very first time taking the assessment. It's going to be offered twice. So at the beginning of the year and sometime in the winter, early February, and we are working with, so if you know a little bit about high school, you realize that in the springtime, we have not only the CASP assessment, the AP assessments, and a whole bunch of other assessments. So we're working with our staff at both high schools so that we can determine the best progression for the next school year. But this year, this is their very first time. They received a lot of professional development, both on our October PD day, but also in class of giving the assessment, looking at the data, and so this is our first try at iReady for 9 through 12. So far, positive feedback. So this is me also, I was going to say that. So one of the things that I think Dr. Garcia mentioned in her report is that conversation that we're having both with each of our principals regarding their diagnostic data. So I've had the privilege of sitting in those kind of data chats with our principals, including our superintendent for elementary. Dr. Aguirre Jacinto also joins us as well. And so we have a reflective tool that our principals complete, and they're looking at their data. They're going over that data with their guiding coalitions or leadership teams. And so they come prepared talking a little bit about what they saw at the close of the 23-24 23-24 school year. What's the movement, right, that we're seeing this year with the diagnostic? And they share with us their action plans of providing that just-in-time instruction and support for students. But we also talk about other systemic things like what type of professional development, right? What are the strategies that you're seeing that are working at your site? And then where do you need additional support? So it's we're right in the middle of those data chats. Today I had 2 of them, and I've been just really impressed with the amount of work and analysis and thought and reflections on behalf of our principals as they present their data to us, but also behind the scenes, all the work that they've done, that staff has been doing to do that analysis and reflect about what's the best course of action to proceed at their particular site, depending on the programs that they've instituted and other things that they have going on at their site. So a little bit about that internal accountability, right? So we can move the work forward.
All right, so another assessment, the LPAC, which I mentioned briefly. Again, this is the test, the assessment that all of our English learners participate in. And so what you see here is the proficiency level of our English learners from last year. We did assess 1,261 students. And then the summative LPAC, what you see there are their scores, and for this we do get a proficiency score. I will also say that just like I mentioned the CAW earlier, if a student takes the CAW and they're an English learner, they must take the alternate assessment for the LPAC. You can't do the SBAC for one and then the alternate assessment for the LPAC. And so the alternate assessment for LPAC, we did test 16 students with this assessment. So that second set, you're looking at 16 students right there. With the LPAC, we can probably go to the next slide. So with the LPAC, what we see is the LPAC score is the initial trigger to start the reclassification process for our students that are then reclassified as fluent English proficient. And so once we get that score, then we start cross-checking with our local data and initiating that process for reclassification. Once students are officially reclassified, then their scores are pulled from that LPAC proficiency. So what you're seeing in the LPAC scores in the previous slide are all of our English students, not including those that were reclassified. And so if you think back to our previous student group data, research says this, but you also see it in the scores. The students that are reclassified tend to do better. Having that second language really elevates student achievement for many reasons. And so what we're seeing here is a graph of going back 5 years of the number of students that have been reclassified with our district. You will see the number from last year is nearly 200. You will see that dip in 2021, and that was obviously the year that things were quite difficult, right, with COVID. And also the procedures for testing were super difficult. It was by appointment only. It was difficult. And so the team, I was not here for that. However, I have talked to the team, and it was difficult. And so we were able to reclassify a smaller number of students, but have quickly recovered and have been able to reclassify more students the last couple of years. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. So before we move on, we wanted to have a little break and see if there are any questions that you might have before we jump into our respond and talk a little bit about the structures and programs.
Colleagues, questions, comments? Vice President Holman?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. On slide 22, that was kind of an alarming slide with, I believe it was 47% of the high school kids tested at 3 years below reading. What's the plan how much of it do you think is just either that they're high school kids who didn't want to take the test versus unfamiliarity with the test, although they've been taking MAP, and I think iReady's probably a little bit more accessible. And So do you think there's much in just terms of the general test itself that caused that? And assuming that there's still a decent number within that 47%, what's the plans for helping the struggling readers at the high school level?
Those are excellent questions. So, today I had my check-in with both of our high school principals, right? And they're having their individual chats, and we chatted a little bit about sort of what happens. I came from secondary, so I hope I can say it without malice. I taught at the high school for about 10 years, and I would say that some students, this is new to them, right? So it depends how we present it to students, or there's a little bit of that. It's a brand new assessment. Like many adolescents, I don't want to blame all of them, right? But maybe perhaps they didn't give it the dedication it deserved. I think it was also new for our staff as well, right, to do the assessment. I think the plan moving forward, both of the high school principals and also including Lisa Martin, who is our central principal, are looking into the ways that we're using tutorial, right? The way that we're using constructing meaning to address that in our classrooms, and really diving into the data, right? To make sure that we have some of those after school programs that provide support for students. So right now, because it's a pilot, right? We know there's going to be some details that we're gonna have to iron out, right? Including like, how do we present this to students? How do we engage that in conversations? And then maybe sharing what our elementary schools and middle schools do quite well, which is sharing that data with students, right? About where they are in as far as the iReady. So it's a little bit of all the things that you mentioned, really.
Can I continue?
Please.
I was saddened to see that EL scores dipped and SPED scores dipped, kind of two of our focus groups. Any thoughts as to why?
Are you in slide, forgive me, slide 16, right?
It was, yes, 16.
Yes. The one thing I would say about our English learners is that every year, as per what Crystal was presenting, is that number changes, and the number of the students, depending on the level, changes as well, because once the students are reclassified, they're taken out of that group, right, and put somewhere else. So yeah, they've been successful. And so it also depends on the number of the students who join our district. I know, for example, in speaking to our secondary folks, we have a lot of students who are newcomers to our district, right, and that changes a little bit of the score. So I think it's our changing student population as well, because I can tell you from chatting with our principals and chatting with our staff, I think everyone is keenly aware of the need to support our English learners. And I think you see that when you walk through classrooms at the elementary level, at the secondary level. I think it's the fluctuation. I think that's why it's only 1.78%. And I think the response to that is the number of students who are being reclassified. So I think for this year, we're probably really close to the number of students that were reclassified this year compared to last year.
Trustee Patterson.
Student Board Member Faruqi, you are a senior, correct? So you would have taken the test last spring. I was wondering if you could comment, and I think you were.
I was actually going to say, I was going to offer some insight on the iReady test specifically. I'll tell you, it's a very long test. I'll admit, I actually did take a nap during my English one because it was so long and I was so tired. It was so much reading. And, I think I mentioned this before my last meeting. I like to try on my tests because I like to see the score. But for a lot of students, they don't care about that. And then when they take that really long test, some of them don't start at the beginning, but some of them they'll start in the beginning, and then halfway through they'll look, because you can check on your progress at the bottom of the test, and they'll see, oh my God, I'm only 30% in, and I've been doing this for an hour. So they kind of just stop trying, because actually a lot of the students had to take more than one day to complete the test. Some of them had to even complete it outside of school just to finish the test. And, I saw there were extra students that were at my extracurriculars would just start working with other friends. So oh, can you help me on this iReady question? Or, okay, let's randomly guess some answers together, guys. Stuff like that. And it's just I guess that would kind of give insight as to why there were so many red or yellows for slide 22. Because when I saw that, I was like, oh, that doesn't surprise me at all. There's just either a lot of students who didn't try, they tried at the beginning and then realized how long the test was, or they just fell asleep and then they woke up and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Trustee Montes. Thank you for that insight.
Thank you, Student Board Member Faruqi, for your insight. And Dr. Jimenez, one question that I had regarding the CAW and LPAC. So it was mentioned that a student needs to be identified as a CAW student in order to take the alternate LPAC. Given that the CAW starts in 3rd grade, what's the system to navigate that for students who might be identified as that being the most appropriate assessment, who are younger than 3rd grade?
I'm trying to understand, is your question, how do we prepare the students for the assessment or having the conversation?
For the alternate LPAC.
Okay.
Maybe that might be a question for Dr. O'Brien.
Yeah, there you go.
Time to phone a friend.
Ed Code has a really clear protocol for who can take the LPAC and who cannot. So there's no guesswork. So we start having that conversation the year before the 3rd grade, they will take that test.
Not for the CAW, but for the alternate LPAC.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Principal Sutton.
Yes, yes.
Trustee Montez, what grade do they begin giving the LPAC?
So as soon as they, now with the law, as soon as they turn 5, they'll take the LPAC.
Yeah, it's in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so it's an IEP team decision, and they follow the same kind of guidance with respect to if the students are able to take the standardized assessment or not. The CDE has guidance for the IEP team.
Appreciate it. That's helpful. And I want to just thank you all for the umbrella of assessment data analysis in terms of looking at the CAW, the fact that we're having these conversations around this very important data marker, the CAST, as well as the SBAC. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? Trustee Horner?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all this information. I'm trying to get my head around slides 24 and 25 on the English language acquisition. And if I understand this correctly, in an ideal world, the proficient would go to 0 because as soon as you're proficient, you reclassify and then you're not in the population that's being checked.
Yeah.
Right, so we should expect this proficiency number, it's kind of a timing thing. You may have gotten the test, being proficient, great, you're ready to reclassify. So am I understanding that correctly? Yeah, so that makes this particular data point kind of hard to use as an indicator. It's like, we're doing better, we're doing worse. It's like it should always be small, and it seems like the real measure is the reclassification.
It really is.
And over time, hopefully this trend will continue. We don't go back to 50. I mean, I remember 2020 and 21. I think we all do, and we know why that data point is kind of irrelevant. But other than that, the trend has been.
I think what we do internally is that as we get the LPAC data, and maybe this is adding a little bit more of that nuance, is that we look internally of how many our level 1 students went up 1 level, sort of what's on the dashboard for the English Learner Performance Indicator, which is a mouthful, right? But we look at how many of our students went up 1 level, because that's year-to-year kind of growth, right? How many went up 2 levels, and that's the data we analyze and that administrators analyze as well with their teams. And then if we have any students who regressed, those are the things that we look at, because that's also found in the English Learner Performance Indicator. That's part of that dashboard. And I think that's a better, I was going to say, indicator than just one figure of where do we need to be strategic, right? What's working at our sites to increase those levels, and where was a little bit of a dip, right? And students who did not increase 1 level on their LPAC. And so what are we going to do to support that and make sure that the students are every year increasing at least a level?
Yeah, that makes sense. The level-to-level transition.
Right.
That's a really key indicator. The slide 24 is. It's data, but it's not that helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Trustee Gardner, did you want to make a comment? Please.
Thank you. So your student board member input was really interesting. I'm not an educator. Are there other tests? I mean, does I already know that test is so long that kids are dropping out of it?
Yes.
I mean, is that, like, how do we kind of help me understand what we do moving forward?
do we stick with iReady? I mean,
Yeah, it's a pilot year, so we really need to stick to it, right, so that we can do the assessment in the winter, which is in February. I will say that what I've learned through my years in iReady, that the first time that students take the test, it's longer than pretty much any other time because it's computer adaptive, right? So for Miriam, who's like, oh my God, it's been an hour, that's because she's doing well on the test, and the test is saying, oh, we need to give her another piece of information because she's doing so well. The second time that students take it, it already knows their level, so it's not going to be as long for that assessment. But the first time you take it, it's trying to figure out where, what your base level is and what standards you've mastered. So that's what we've learned along our way. So since,
The other thing is that our students in K-8 are already using it, so it already knows their levels. So as they move up, they won't have the same experience that our current high school students are having because it'll already know their level. So it's our current high school students in 10th through 12th grade who don't yet have a level who are having that long experience.
and do the students know this going, like, are they prepped for it when they go to take the test so they understand it's going to take a while, or?
they should be, but if not, then we need to do a much better job, and so we really are appreciative of the feedback.
Yeah, it's great feedback.
Trustee Warner, did you have another comment?
Just that, I mean, that's the obvious follow-up question. Did these students know, hey, it's going to be long and grueling this time, but the better you do this time, the quicker it'll be next time? Sounds like maybe that message didn't get to all our students.
Yeah, if I may, Student Board Member Faruqi, your comments are timely. In the last decade, we've learned in education a great deal about how the brain learns. And much of that information now has been incorporated in strategies, instructional strategies, many of which we use in our own district. Having said that, I'm wondering how we can utilize that brain research to impact, in a positive way, our students being able to take those tests in a way where we're actually measuring their ability and not necessarily their endurance.
Right.
So I don't know if you can address that now, but that's certainly something that
I think that's something that we've been thinking about as we saw the first diagnostic for 9th and 12th grade. I think to Julie's point, to Dr. Aguirre Jacinto's point, I think that's not going to be an issue for the students who are coming up. So this year's 8th graders who will go into 9th grade, when they take it next year, iReady will know their level, so it will not be as lengthy. But for this year, I think both myself and our team and our high school principals were thinking about how do we make sure that our students understand, right, the importance of the test, and what kind of data does it give? Why is the data important to them? Because if I was a student, I was a teacher for a long time, they want to know, it's like, what's in it for me? Right? And, right? Am I right? Right. For us, like, I think there needs to be some thinking around that before we're certainly doing that before our next administration, which is in February.
And Dr. Jimenez, do we have flexibility in adjusting how we administer the test?
As far as the duration of the test, no, because it's computer adaptive. It's like a package deal. What we do have is flexibility right now, because it's like a pilot year for the high schools, is extending that window until we can roll out a kind of messaging and support for our students so that they understand that importance.
Because I recall that when I was still working and we were doing high stakes testing, it seemed like 100 years ago, we had students take breaks, we had snacks for them and all that.
That you can do. Yes.
That we can do.
We just can't shorten the assessment.
Right.
What we could do is create a schedule and a strategy that students are refocused, right?
Yeah.
They take a little bit of brain break and reassure the students that once they get their level, it won't be as lengthy.
It would seem to me also that there may be an opportunity to get student feedback.
Absolutely.
And to kind of problem solve
exactly
this issue.
Yeah.
Student Board Member Faruqi, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I guess it was mostly answered from this discussion, but I guess I just wanted to ask, because I was curious, how long have you guys used this kind of data to kind of figure out student level?
Good question.
So before iReady, right, which this is our second year at kinder through 8th grade. We had MAP, which is another assessment, which was just as long, honestly. But we switched over to iReady because the data is really usable, and even when you share those reports with students, they really understand where they are and where some of those skills are needed to increase, right? So that's one of the reasons we changed. And, we've gotten a lot of good feedback from our parents in the K-8 because teachers share those reports with the parents, and parents really appreciate knowing how to support their children as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I wanted to make a comment, or I guess like propose a solution maybe, I guess like have more transparency with when it comes to what these test scores are for, because a lot of the time for, I think almost every kind of like this kind of test that I've taken, it's always like, it's kind of comedic, honestly. Like when a teacher tells their students, oh, it's time for MAP testing, or you're doing this iReady, it's just a whole wave of sighs and disappointment from the students. Because they know what it's like, they know, oh, it's going to be this lengthy test, but they don't actually know what it's for. It's just like, oh, for the state, or like, I don't know, the teacher needs it. But we don't actually know what it's for. And I guess like, if you tell them, or if you try to emphasize more on its importance, or like, what it's actually going to be used for on the more personal, local level, you might see better results, at least in the high school levels. And I guess I also want to point out, as again, like a student who's taken the test, you might see like, when it comes to like data, you might see some slips where like, oh, these students didn't do better this year compared to last year. And I mean like, because there's so many breaks in between, like sometimes we have our spring break, our winter break, our summer break, and between like, of course, last year and then the next year, you have your whole summer break where a bunch of things happen and stuff like that. So you might see like, oh, some dips there. Because I know personally, like, I know for sure, like when we take the fall testing and the spring testing, my spring test is somehow lower than my fall one, even though I for sure learned something in this subject. So I'm like, okay, but yeah.
Student President Escoto, Student Board Member Faruqi, if you can, could you share what was your experience with the results of that assessment in terms of how was the data that you received? Did you
For MAP or iReady?
For iReady.
So for iReady, I know I searched up how they scored, like because we got a number, but we don't really know like what it meant. Like I know in MAP, it gave you like a goal range, and you could easily kind of compare, oh, how am I doing this grade level? With iReady, they just kind of give you a number. So I went ahead and just searched up like, oh, what does this score mean in terms of like my grade level? When it comes to that, I guess it's just like, when I viewed my score, for English and math, I was at grade level, so I'm fine with that. And so, but I know for other students, when they took the test, they were either below the grade level, or some of them would be at the grade level, and some of them would be 2 grades below. And so I know it had different factors to it, like, oh, maybe they did try and that's just where they at. Different factors, oh, they fell asleep during the test, and then they woke up and they're like, okay, I'm done. And then, other factors like that. When I viewed my score, I didn't really know what it meant. Again, I had to like search it up. So I guess it's kind of like, if you were really into the test, like you wanted to know where your grade level was at, and like you were determined to take the test, how do I say this? You'd probably expect a better score. But for students, I guess I should also add, is this for the reading or for math as well?
ELA.
Okay.
We're not talking about reading.
Okay.
Then I get to the math part.
Okay, I guess for the math portion, like, it also takes into account for things that you learned like a billion years ago, and then it brought it back, and I'm like, I don't remember that. So just like, there's also factors like that can also apply for both reading and math as well.
Thank you, Student Board Member Faruqi. And so, yeah, really helpful data. And one of my wonderings was wondering around to what extent might this be used also as a data point for reclassification?
Yes, so we do have we can use iReady for reclassification, and so part of that is looking at those data points for the high school, yeah.
Great. Any other comments? Yeah. Vice President Altman.
Sorry, I'm back. One thing last year at the school board conference, at their data seminar, it's like you need early literacy data. How can we see that?
It's coming up.
Oh, awesome.
Early literacy.
I didn't go through all the slides.
It's
Thank
okay.
you. I stopped before the
Literacy
end.
expert here, so I don't want to.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Just one point before we move on. It was, in terms of, as our student board member said, right, in terms of effort or understanding of the assessment, when we look at the breakdown by grade level, our current ninth graders who took the test last year's eighth graders did so much better than our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, which to us indicates it's a, you know what, this is too long, I don't understand this. So obviously learnings for us in terms of messaging, but it was 3 or 4 times, I mean, in terms of percentages of proficiency and on grade level, there was a vast difference between our ninth graders and the rest of the grades.
I also wanted to make a comment. I've been actually discussing this with my classmates and stuff, because I feel like you guys are worried about those who are maybe behind in their grade level. I guess I want to point out that the class of 2025, I believe this is the case for Sobrado as well, and I know for sure at Live Oak, we actually have a very high percentage of 4.0 above students, which is I believe at Live Oak, it's top 40, and the class of 2025 are all 4.0 and above, and I believe that's 15% of our class is 4.0 and above. So I suppose, I feel like that can be a valuable resource to find out, how are so many people doing this well? It's not even counting 3.5 to 3.9, it's 4.0, all 4.0 and above. And they're very smart. There's even more people who are insanely smart like them, who maybe just didn't got to be in the class and they got a 3.9. But there are so many smart students who maybe they have really high scores on those MAP tests, maybe they don't, but they do have very valuable knowledge about how to study, how to care more about school, factors like that and resources. So I suggest maybe surveying or interviewing those kind of students to see, how would you want to, if they have any solutions for students who might be doing as well as them, how do we get more students like you?
And demystify why they're successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking that you were going to suggest even tutoring.
I know many students are also busy, but yeah.
Right. Thank you.
20
minutes, please.
That's me.
Time to get up.
All right. So we're, thank you.
Not ready.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that feedback and those great questions. They certainly help us. We want to make sure that we're doing best for students, so we take a lot of time to reflect and refine our processes and certainly our messaging, and so that feedback is really important. One of the things that we wanted to outline for you is okay, so you've seen the data, right, and some of the questions, and so now what, right? What's the next step? And so as we began this presentation, we talked a little bit about those structures, right, that we have in our system and implemented. So we're going to take some time in the next couple of slides to really talk about those structures, whether that's professional learning teams and those other programs that we're working on to make sure that we're providing the right just-in-time interventions for students and the support for staff. So.
All right, so the first thing that we want to start with is our refresher on our curriculum alignment work. And so district-wide, our teachers work together to collaborate on essential standards by grade level and content area. And then they developed learning progressions, which are the foundational skills that build up to proficiency in that essential standard. And then they collaborated together across the district to benchmark across the year by trimester or quarter when those underlying skills should be mastered in order for students to reach proficiency in the essential standards by the end of the year. One caveat is that we are continuing to learn about math and literacy and our other content areas, and so these essential standards may be something that we come back to and revisit as part of an iterative cycle. As we learn more about what students need to be successful, we may revisit this work, but it's important to note that while we talk about students gaining proficiency on the essential standards and making sure that we continue to teach and intervene until they reach proficiency, even if we determine that we need to identify other essential standards, we're still responsible for teaching all standards to students. And so this work is contributing towards a library of resources for teachers with respect to the standards that are expected by grade level and content area. Next slide, please. And we are continuing our work with professional learning teams, and this is a huge linchpin in our process. Our teachers have dedicated collaboration time where they meet together and look at their students' data similarly to what you're doing, and look at their student groups and down to the individual to determine what are the next instructional steps. Each school has a guiding coalition that looks at the school-wide data to determine the direction of the school and what professional development opportunities might be needed or what types of intervention might be appropriate. There's a shared agenda and note taker across the district so that any teacher at any school site is familiar with the format of those meetings and the types of conversations that should be happening. And it's all consistently focused around DeForest questions, around what do we want students to know, how will we know if they've learned it, what will we do if they've already learned it, and what will we do if they haven't learned it yet. And so by continuing that process as a district-wide system, we're all speaking the same language and looking at the same data to help move our students forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Matsis, our elementary literacy TOSA, and she's going to share a little bit with you about early literacy.
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I'd like to highlight the importance of our work within the MTSS multi-tiered systems of support framework, particularly around ensuring that all of our students have meaningful, high-quality, universal instruction first. In this slide, for slide 1, we know that strong foundation for literacy begins focusing on essential skills, and one of those critical components is phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is the ability for students to connect what they know about oral language to the sounds that make up words. It is a foundational skill that allows students to recognize and manipulate the sounds that they hear before they begin to associate these sounds with letters. Essentially, it's where students learn to hear, segment, blend sounds, which is a critical first step before they can read and write words. I've had the privilege of working alongside our talented teachers and staff to train and implement in the Hagerty Phonemic Awareness curriculum and develop that into our universal instruction in TK through 5th grade. This program supports students by offering consistent, research-based instruction that strengthens their ability to hear and understand the sounds and words. By incorporating this into our daily practice, we're providing students with the tools that they need to become successful readers. Next slide, please. We recently went through a phonics pilot to select a supplemental phonics curriculum to further support universal instruction through systematic sequential phonics. Bridge to Reading by Hagerty was selected as our supplemental phonics curriculum. This type of instruction helps students understand the alphabetic principle, the concept that letters and letter patterns represent the sounds in spoken language. By teaching phonics in a structured and deliberate way, we ensure that students have a clear and consistent plan to decode words, which is essential for fluency and comprehension. Our teachers are trained during our August PD days as well as October for professional development, and this training enabled our educators for strategies needed to effectively integrate the curriculum into our classrooms. Since working closely with the district staff, administrators, teachers, and supporting the implementation of phonics to ensure that our teachers have the materials, knowledge, and skills needed for their consistent and effectively enhancing our students' foundational literacy skills. Next slide, please. Historically, the percentage of students needing reading intervention is highlighted in the need to strengthen our universal instruction happening in our classrooms. By providing teachers with the essential tools such as phonemic awareness and phonics curriculums and training, we've been able to enhance the quality of foundational reading skills taught to all students. This approach not only improves overall literacy instruction, but also helps us to identify students who struggle more with reading in a more meaningful and precise way, ensuring that we can address their needs early and efficiently. Next slide, please. I am working to support the talented reading and intervention teachers and paraprofessionals who provide intensive instruction to students who are not responding to universal and targeted instruction within the classrooms. Our focus in intervention is to ensure that students are accurately identified using data from multiple assessments, allowing us to tailor their specific needs. We closely monitor students' progress through ongoing progress monitoring in the intervention setting, ensuring each student's growth is carefully tracked. This process is done in partnership with families, keeping them informed and engaged in their students' progress. When students are not making expected progress, the teacher collaborates with a student study team, or an SST, to communicate concerns and adjust support plans to ensure that no student falls through the cracks. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to continuing to support students through this important work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. We really appreciate such a great team. Anyway, I can't stop smiling because this is a dynamic team, and we're so appreciative. I don't think I'd be doing our secondary folks, justice if I didn't mention some of the other things, right? So in the early grades, we have Kristen who's working with our dedicated staff, right, to provide that great first-year instruction, and then supporting our reading intervention teachers, which are also outlined in our LCAP, right, as one of the goals that we have for elementary. But in secondary, we also have those AVID strategies, right? And I won't take a lot of time, but we'll talk about Wicker, right, which is writing, inquiry, collaboration, and those are the strategies. We have AVID leads at each of the secondary sites, and each site has an AVID plan of how these strategies get embedded into all core content areas, right? And what you'll see here as you look at the Wicker and some of the other things is like a thread, right, about writing and collaboration and organization. And then the next slide, really briefly, and we could probably spend a whole time just talking about English learners and about the need to incorporate these strategies, is if you go to the next slide, Kelly. Thank you. It's constructing meaning, right? So in our secondary, in our middle schools and high schools, right, the vast majority of our teachers have taken professional development through constructing meaning. And for those folks who are looking from home, they'll be like, yep, I've seen those modules. I use those modules, right? I use those strategies. So these are some of the modules and some of the strategies that our teachers use in the secondary lens to make sure that we are being very intentional about the way that we are giving students, whether they're English learners or not, access to core curriculum and some of those strategies like note-taking, right, and using academic writing to make meaning from new content. And last but certainly not least, right, as part of our conversation, this is the draft cover for our plan for English learner success. I've had the pleasure of working with our DLAC and our talented group of staff members in revising that for all last year and really making some decisions about coherence and formatting. And what you have there on that slide is the chapters that are in each of this plan. This is a policy document that guides the work of how we support our English learners in the district. I have to be honest, this is the beginning of my second year. I inherited this and I'm just thrilled, and I shared that with secondary council and elementary council and anybody I can talk to, of the incredible work of this team. This document is 155 pages long. Parents have asked, can we have an executive summary? And the answer to that is yes. But it is an incredible piece of work that we're going to be leaning into to create both that policy and that practicum, right, of the way that we support our English learners, from the way that we identify students and do program placement and how we talk about reclassification and those celebrations, to the way that we implement the instruction in our classrooms, and then how do we monitor and evaluate whether or not we're being successful with our English learners. So we've had that conversation briefly right now about the LP, right, the English Learner Performance Indicator, but right now, this is in draft form, and our wonderful DLAC folks have already given us a lot of feedback pretty much on every chapter through last year. They have one more piece of homework, as Dr. Ivan Rosales Montes mentioned, which is to go back and look at it one more time, and then they'll come back in November and vote on it, and it will be my privilege and just such an honor to present this to you as a completed item for our December board meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
In addition to our support for English learners, we also have our dual language immersion. program. And some exciting work that's going on is that we are in the process of doing a TK-12 vertical alignment. And so we have a team that meets together once a month to discuss the goals of our program. So you can see that we want students to be bilingual and biliterate, academic proficiency in both languages, and experience sociocultural competency. And so that team is meeting together to discuss what that program should look like for our students in TK through 12. We're also going to be partnering with CABE to come provide some professional development and coaching for our teachers to really strengthen their understanding of the dual language model and the innovations that have been happening in research. Next slide, please. And this is a very small sample size, but we wanted to share the data with you because if you remember back to the previous slide, our overall average in the district was 44.89%, and our EL percentage was 7.39%. And so if you look at the blue bar, those are the students who are participating in the dual language immersion program. And as it was mentioned earlier, it takes some time for students to acquire a language, and so we would not expect the third grade results to be very high. It's their first time taking the test, and it's in English, but you can see that for the other grade levels, the students participating in the dual immersion program are performing roughly around the level of all of our other students in the district, which is very exciting because at least half of those students are English learners. Next slide, please.
All right, so now we're moving into sort of the actions and impact of the data that we're looking at. And so this is just an infographic that kind of paints a little bit of the road of our growth in ELA this year, looking at our SBAC scores. And so you'll see, again, overall, we did grow by 1.9% overall. The state grew by 0.38% overall. And then we've seen 4 out of our 6 TK5 elementary schools grew in ELA, both of our K-8s, both of our comprehensive high schools. And then out of those 13 student groups that were highlighted at the beginning, that very first slide of data that I presented, 9 out of the 13 student groups grew in ELA. And then 5 out of 7 grades grew in ELA, and that's 3 through 8 and 11th grade. So this is just a nice little overview. So now, after our conversation with iReady, we also wanted to look at cohort data, just like we did with CAST data earlier. And so what this looks at is the beginning of the year scores from last year compared to the beginning of the year scores from this year. And what you'll see is growth across most grade levels, right? And so remember that at the beginning of the year, it's testing for on grade level for that specific grade at that specific time. And so we saw, 14% growth in first grade, same in second grade and across the board. We did see a little bit of a dip from third to that cohort in fourth, which interestingly, we've also seen it in other clips in other areas. So it's certainly something that we are starting to dive into and see, where do we need to support a little bit more across that grade band. And so if we look at this data set, we grew about 4.5% from last year to this year overall, if we're looking at this cohort of students. Now, again, because we only had first through eighth graders test that first diagnostic last year, that's the data we have for this year. Years moving forward, if we continue with iReady, especially at the high school level, we'll be able to also look at that, 9th, 10th, 11th, into 12th grade. Mind continuing? All right, so now the California Spanish assessment, which I mentioned earlier. This assessment is optional, however, SMG did test their 3rd through 8th graders in this assessment. It is in Spanish, obviously, and the scores that the state releases are mean scale scores, meaning they do not release a proficiency by grade level, either at the state level or the site level. And this is because this assessment looks at a number of content standards that really are optional at this point across the state and across districts. And so each district kind of chooses to focus on different aspects. And so it is to be determined whether there ever actually will be a proficiency score that is released for this. However, this is where we are right now. That trend line you see is the high average. We added a table there so you could see the score breakdowns, low, medium, high, and so that trend line is just showing you where our SMG students are compared to the state, compared to the high level band that we would like them to be scoring at in that mean scale score. All right, next slide, please. All right, so State Seal of Biliteracy. This is a seal that our graduating seniors, upon receiving their high school diploma, also get a nice little seal on their high school diploma that indicates they are both biliterate, and I just forgot the other word, bilingual. Thank you. It's all of that. It is, 8:50 and I'm feeling it. Okay, so students to be able to meet and earn this score, they have to have a certain GPA across all of their English classes in high school, 9 through 12. They have to do well, a B average or above in a language other than English, Spanish, French, Italian, Chinese, whatever it may be. And then they have to do well in a proficiency exam, and that could include an AP exam. If we had international baccalaureate classes, IB classes, that would be IB as another exam. And so we see, the trends across the years. Again, that 2021, we've seen this across our data. And so we are now rebuilding that back, building that up. And then Julie is here because part of the DLI vertical alignment team sort of has a little bit to do with this.
So we would anticipate that our students participating in the dual immersion program would achieve the seal of biliteracy. But in talking with staff and families, many students are not completing their pathway because they're interested in other electives or they are not completing the program through middle school. And so part of the work that we're doing with the Dual Language Alignment Committee is trying to figure out how do we redesign our program to be have classes that are more of interest to students so that they are, interested in completing their pathway and receiving their seal of biliteracy, because for most of them, by the time they get to high school, they could do it as a freshman. And so we are discussing that as part of the dual language team.
Thank you, Dr. Aguirre Jacinto. On the topic of State Seal of Biliteracies, the Biliteracy Award, I was wondering to what extent have we explored implementing SCOE's attainment recognition certificate in 3rd and 5th grade?
Yeah, so the committee has started talking about that and trying to determine if it's something that they want to continue doing locally at the school level, or if we want to try to integrate them into maybe our reclassification ceremony, or we are having those conversations. San Martin, Gwen, and I believe Walsh as well do those locally, and so trying to figure out what does that look like as part of a district program rather than just a local decision.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, we appreciate it. I want to do a shout out before I forget with our DLI team. It's a group of our teachers, both at SMG and at Walsh, who get together once a month, right, after a very long day of teaching, and our administrators as well, so that they're working on creating that dual language immersion, basically roadmap. And Live Oak. The Live Oak, so maybe they'll forgive me for missing them. And the Live Oak, right? But we also have our Britain Middle School attending that and really being thoughtful partners about what does that runway look like, so we appreciate all their work. If you can go to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a little bit like a shout out of, we're beginning at the very beginning stages with San Jose State University to establish a BCLAD pipeline. That's really important as we grow our program, right, to make sure that we have folks that not only have the credential, but have the heart for the work, right, for dual language immersion. And so we're at those are in the very, very beginning stages, conversations, right, and preliminary conversations. The second part, which is the BTPDP, try saying that really fast, right? We have applied to be, and a big shout out to Corina Sapien, who helped us write our way into this consortium. And so the consortium is run through, I'm going to say, I'll forget which district it is, but basically it's a grant from the Sobrato Early Academic Language. And what they are going to do is we have a whole bunch of districts, including ourselves, where we will be basically having pass-through services. So the goal of that program, that partnership, is that we have bilingual teachers in our district who are bilingual and bicultural, but they don't have a BCLAD, right? They were probably a student who said, like, I'm not taking 12 extra classes, right? I want to get my credential. But this is an ability for us to be able to share the grant with those folks, with those teachers who are bilingual, and the grant will pay for some webinars, some classes, and their ability to make sure that they get the bilingual authorization. So that's a very exciting venture. We know we've been awarded and we can be part of that consortium. More details to come as to how many folks are going to be participating. The other thing about this grant, that in addition to helping teachers who are bilingual get their bilingual authorization, that we do have some folks in our midst who already have a BCLAD that were probably like me, right? I have a BCLAD, but I taught English language arts, right? So I was doing primary language instruction just with the students who were new to my classroom, right? But I wasn't doing a bilingual classroom, right? And so you have some BCLAD folks in our district who said, you know, I really would like to polish up my Spanish because maybe down the line I would be interested in, you know, as the dual language immersion program progresses, right, maybe teach one of those courses. And so this grant also allows us to be able to pay for teachers who have a BCLAD and want to polish their skills to be able to take Spanish language classes and some of the other pedagogy so that they're prepared, and if an opportunity comes, they're ready and able to go and be part of our team for dual language immersion. So that's really exciting. And so we're looking for more opportunities so that we can grow our own and provide our teachers that support that they need so that they can have the credentials that they need for that passion, right?
Dr. Jimenez, on this topic of partnership with San Jose State, working at a graduate school of ed, I know that one of the services that schools can offer is do a transcript review for individuals who are interested in earning their BCLAD. And so I wonder if through this partnership, that's a service that they can offer our district. Say they took relevant coursework in college, and you know, of the 3 CSETs they would have to take to earn their BCLAD or bilingual authorization in Spanish, they, after a transcript review, it's determined that they only need to take 1. So that might be
yes, we're going to
something
write that on our notes as we're having those conversations. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But I think these are 2 great opportunities to grow our own and have people that know our students in Morgan Hill and care about the programs and are nurturing those programs to become part of that program. So that's an exciting next step. And as we roll out and we'll probably put it on a board update some of that when we start rolling out the BTPT, right? And so we can let you know how many teachers and what does that look like. So thank you so much, Kelly. And now I'm going to pass it over to our phenomenal Cindy Warkocki, who is just amazing.
All right, everybody's favorite time, math. So to start with, here's what SBAC tests our students. These are the categories that students are tested on or assessed on for SBAC in mathematics: concepts and procedures, problem solving and modeling and data analysis, and communicating reasoning. So notice that there's still a lot of language there. So even though we're doing math, we still expect our students to be able to communicate their mathematics. And again, just like in ELA, they're tested grades 3 through 8, and then our 11th graders. As our student board member said for iReady, hey, I was taking iReady and there was a lot of math that I hadn't done in a while. It's the same thing when our 11th graders take math for SBAC, so just something to keep in mind. Next slide. Again, language and mathematics. So like I said, we expect our students, and our framework expects our students to use language in mathematics. And this is, if you think about, you know, math maybe how you learned it, where it was just calculating numbers, we expect more from our students, and we know they can do more. And so we have different routines and different practices for our students. So there are 8 math language routines. Here's some of them. And there are also 8 standards for mathematical practice. And I love the standards for mathematical practice because unlike our math standards that are different at each grade level, our standards for mathematical practice span TK through 12. So these are practices that our students should be doing across all the grade levels, and something we can align for our students and expect of our students as they're working in all the grade levels. So something our teachers can work towards vertically as well. So next slide. Here's our data, our CASP results. So in our different groups, different cohorts, we can look, we can say, yay, we're growing. But also we know that there's still work to do. So, and yeah, if there's, so yes, growth. We, again, with our African American students, we saw that they have the 10% growth. We have growth, in all of our in all of our areas, and all of our groups, and that's fantastic. And so, yes, and next slide. Here is our cohorts, like we looked at for our ELA. Here's our math cohort groups. So 3rd to 4th, 4th to 5th, 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th. Notice, again, we see that little drop. We had a little drop here going from 5th to 6th, a bigger drop going 4th to 5th. Look at that great growth. Our groups going from 6th to 7th, so we're doing some work there in middle school, which is fantastic. Yeah, kind of stagnant there, 7 to 8. So next slide. And this is our CA for math. So again, those same 21 students, some great growth, 15.81% for them. So next slide.
All right, and similarly to the iReady reading data, this is the iReady math data from Diagnostic 1 at the beginning of last year to Diagnostic 3 at the end of last year. The top bar is the end of the year results, and as you can see, the green grew. When we're looking at that triangle down at the bottom, we want to see the numbers start trickling down, which is what we saw. So the intensive dropped 17%, targeted dropped 9%, and universal increased by 27%. So our students are moving in the direction that we hope to see. Next slide. And this is Diagnostic 1 from the beginning of this year for grades 1 through 8. And as we mentioned previously, the yellow at this point in the year is not yet an area of concern because it is the beginning of the year. However, we do expect that number to go down as students move into the green by Diagnostic 2. Next slide, please. Is that you?
And this is our high school data for the beginning of the year. We kind of already talked to the high school iReady data. So a lot of, growth there. So next slide. So our response to this, first of all, you get me. But with that, I'm working closely with our admin after they have these data chats that you've heard about. They've reached out to me and said, hey, can you help us? We need this. So they're really recognizing what their teachers need and what their students need for the next steps. We're doing some work on the new math framework that came out, aligning our teachers with the math framework so that we are prepared to adopt new curriculum when that comes out. We have PD across the board, and we're working with the Santa Clara County with their Cecil grant at Los Paseos. And then another thing that we're doing is working with California Ed Partners with a P3 coherence collaboration with El Toro and Los Paseos. So I'm going to have Principal Sutton come up and talk to you about that.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight to speak to you about the incredible things we're doing in math at Los Paseos and Joe. I will speak for Joe and I tonight, Principal Gadan. So sorry you have to hear a lot of me, but as Dr. Jimenez mentioned earlier about excitement inheriting a grant, this is a grant. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay, sorry. This is a grant I'm extremely excited to be inheriting. This math work is incredible, and I feel super excited and motivated by what I'm already seeing our teachers do. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that today. Next slide. So again, we're going to be talking to you tonight about the California Ed Partners, which is a collaboration with the Gates Foundation and some incredible, brilliant people that we get to work with, partner with, learn from, and build systems that will hopefully lead our district into improving our math practices, TK all the way through third grade. Next slide, please. So why focus on TK, preschool, all the way through third grade? Over 3 million culturally and linguistically diverse children under 5 live in California. What an honor and a privilege and a responsibility, right? And of those students, California has one of the largest achievement gaps. You know, we see this in our data. Our teachers work really hard and do a lot of incredible things, and we have a lot of work to do, as seen by our initial math data. So Universal Preschool, TK, California supports K through third grade coherence by increasing our trajectory and our scores in math particularly, and sustaining gains over time. Next slide, please. So this is a really important and can be emotional slide. Can you click the next part? There should be more here. One more time. One more time. There you go. So this is the fade out data, and this is really important. We know that TK and preschool provide our students with an advantage, specifically our students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged and our English learners or our emergent bilinguals, our students acquiring a second language. We see, if you look at the red and blue data at the bottom, we see the advantage that students that attend TK have, but you start to see this advantage decrease as we enter third and then fourth grade. So our work is to make sure that our students that start in our schools in preschool and TK don't lose this advantage, but continue to excel and exceed while bringing everyone else up as we begin to streamline TK universally. So our hope and expectation is with some of this work that we do, these advantages do not fizzle out, but instead continue to increase. One of DeForest's questions is, what do we do when our students already know? And part of the work with this grant is not only bringing all of our students up, but challenging and really producing real rigor in our math curriculum. Next slide. Again, strong starts in the early years are extremely necessary. As you see from this data, when students enter third grade, 2 or more grade levels below, it's extremely difficult to catch up by the time they enter 12th grade. You can see the data here. The highest performing high schools in the state of California still have struggles. You can see LA Unified, the median progress, and our top tier schools still, when students enter third grade behind, it takes a lot of work to catch up. And we want our students to start ahead and keep that advantage. That's our goal in Morgan Hill. Next slide, please. Next slide. You can go ahead and just keep clicking until I get all my, yes, nuts and bolts. Beautiful. So our coherent pre-K3 district system, what we're really trying to do is clear expectations for pre-K through third grade level standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. It's more than just essential standards and common formative assessments. Common pre-K3 effective instructional practices, building teacher and admin capacity. I'm doing a lot of teaching in this process myself too, not just leading, but teaching our pre-K through 3 teachers and administrators, and then monitoring our pre-K through 3 student progress that guides decision-making. So being really reflective, again, those systems of growth. Next slide. So, again, inheriting. This is some of the work that began last year. And I'll talk a little bit about phase 1. So phase 1 of this grant was standards and curriculum alignment. Next slide. And what we did, you can go ahead and click that 2 more times. There you go. And what we did is a group of teachers from Los Paseos and El Toro worked together to review our curriculum and really do a curriculum audit. And it was very powerful to do this with Dr. Aguirre Jacinto and Dr. Jimenez. And I will say teachers felt empowered to be honest and critical consumers with their directors and superintendents in the room. And the superintendents and directors did a good job honoring their capacity and their critiques in a way that made teachers feel like this work matters. And it's been so powerful. I've never really seen anything like this in my time in education. So again, teachers are buying in, and that's why it matters and it's working. So this first curriculum alignment that we've adopted with the grant is an activity called Green, Yellow, Red. And what we did, you can go ahead and go to, actually, you can stay here. What we did is we really looked at our adopted curriculum and kind of said, is this lesson meeting the standards? Is this lesson kind of meeting the standards? And does this lesson not meet the standards? We have curriculum that has things that are relevant to what students are learning, but it might not be meeting our essential standards with fidelity. Next slide. So our teachers engaged in this audit, and what they did is they looked at the adopted curriculum, they looked at our standards, and they looked at the continuum for mathematical practices and kind of evaluated the rigor, whether or not the lesson met student needs, essential standards, as well as provided challenge. So if you look at this first example, I don't know if you have it, I'm assuming you have it right in front of you, you can see that our teachers rated this lesson a yellow. This is not a question and answer, but I think it's productive if you take a second to just kind of look at this lesson as critical consumers yourself and kind of start to think about what are some reasons that the teachers did not evaluate this as a green lesson. A little CFA for you. Does anything jump out to you as a reason this wouldn't be a green, a bright thumbs up? Looking at the standard below you, why might not professional educators say this is not quite exactly what we would want for our students? Yeah.
Well, looking at the left side, I'm wondering where we can hear student voice in the process, right? And so we just see the expected task is to input a number, but I'm curious on, when I'm looking at the standard, what they're thinking about as they're solving the problem and how they're approaching the problem.
Yeah. Anyone else? Trustee Altman, yes.
Since the goal calls for fluency, how can, are they practicing fluency? Or are they practicing counting for the left side?
Yeah, I guess similar to what Dr. Montes said, it doesn't really employ any strategy. It's just kind of direct and straightforward. It doesn't really require the student to really think about anything. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent points. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I know it's getting late. I could talk about this all day. 2 more times. So what you can kind of see here, the math task analysis guide is what teachers use. So we have the standards, we have our curriculum, and then we use this math task analysis guide, which as we move towards future adoptions, we're really training teachers to be critical consumers, which is great. They're getting these skill sets to really not just say, I think this works, I don't think this works. Here's evidence-based research that guides, is this a low-level demand or a high-level demand? And we want our students working at high-level demands. So as you can see here, a lot of what you saw specifically on that left page is low-level demands. And we really want to move our students towards high-level demands. And that's the work we did in phase 1. Next slide, please. And then in phase 2, we've identifying and weave, that's the word of the day, the word of the season, weaving in open and engaging tasks. And I know when I had my visit with several board members, we talked about some of these open tasks that we observed in some of my classrooms. And so open and engaging tasks are really tasks where students have multiple entry points, where we have low floors and high ceilings, where students have an opportunity to use language in learning because we know those doing the talking are doing the learning. When students are just memorizing and operating under rote tasks, their learning doesn't transfer to their long-term retrieval. It doesn't support our English learners. And so we're moving towards systems that evidence-wise we know supports all learners. And open and engaging tasks is one of those things that as a district we've chosen to operate under. Next slide. So specifically, we spent some incredible time in Burbank, working with the Gates Foundation and several other districts that some in years above us, some starting where we are, just kind of going through the different tasks that might lead us there. As a district, us and El Toro have adopted counting collections as our first task. That we're going to use as an open task to challenge our students in order to hopefully meet their needs. So looking at our red, yellow, and green, analyzing our standards, making sure we're teaching them rigorously, and then implementing counting collections as a task to really open the floor for our students' learning. So what counting collections do, we gather collections of objects in the classroom. My teachers have already gone crazy with this. We now have a counting collection library at Los Paseos if anyone wants to check anything out. Buttons, beads, craft sticks, Unifix cubes. It's also an incredible way to bring culture into the classroom by allowing students to bring in their own collection, explaining the importance of the collection, and then bringing math into it. And what we do is we really talk to students about how many are in your collection, count with a partner or by yourself, record your total and how you counted your collection. And then the magic happens because of our teachers. This isn't by accident. Teachers prep rigorous questions that allow all students entry. There's a lot of fish bowling, students coming around other students' work and hearing their thinking. It's just magical. So if you ever want to come by Los Paseos, someone's usually doing a counting collection. Our teachers have been so engaged, they've actually gone above and beyond. If you're up late and want to engage in some reading, we've actually adopted an optional book study in choral counting and counting collections by the brilliant Dr. Megan Franke. So if you'd like to join us, we're learning more about math discourse and we're working really hard. The grant is only with one teacher from each grade level, but I have 11 teachers that have chosen to participate in this without compensation just because they want to learn on their free time. And I can say that in my school, K through second grade, I'm already seeing it in almost every room just because it's exciting and teachers are energized about what they're seeing in their student learning. So we know we have a big responsibility in meeting our students in math, and this is a really great grant to get us there. I think that's my last slide. Next slide. Yeah, that was, one more slide. So if you look in color, all the beautiful color, that's where we have been and that's where we're going. And we're currently on facilitating meaningful math discourse with our counting collection practice. We're getting to posing purposeful questions, as I stated, that's that teacher work. And next year, our next year is in the gray, so you can kind of find where we're going. Got a lot of work to do, but it's really fun. And it's a 3-year grant, so teachers feel really empowered to build this landing strip for other teachers. So they take that responsibility very seriously. Next slide, I think. Yeah. Questions, comments?
Okay. Thank you, Principal Sutton. Fantastic. Ms. Wargocki, thank you. Remind me, implementation timeline for the new math framework.
So the framework's been adopted. We are waiting for the state to kind of approve curriculum, which could take place in December, but probably not until next December.
Will we have choices?
Yes.
Okay, so back to Ms. Sutton's example of teachers empowered to go through the curriculum. That's, I would imagine that's curriculum we had adopted that didn't really look like it was elevating us to the level of teaching standards we want. So there's lessons learned there, right, about curriculum adoptions. And are we going to be able to apply any lessons we've learned to our adoption process for the new math framework?
Yes, so we're actually.
That's the answer I was hoping for.
We're actually training 2 different groups of teachers. So the teachers at Los Paseos and El Toro are working on the curriculum evaluation process that Principal Sutton described. And then we have another group of teachers working with the Silicon Valley Math Initiative, which is the work that Ms. Wargocki described around the framework and analyzing it and what does that mean. So we are looking to have 2 robustly trained groups of teachers with kind of 2 slightly different lenses available to help us evaluate curriculum.
Student board member.
Okay, so I have like a billion thoughts running through my head right now, but I want to focus on like the math. So I guess I really want to like point out like the interesting pattern you see in like the math cohorts when you looked at the level of math performance between all the grade levels, how there was such like, I suppose, random dips and like between grade levels. But thinking back onto my own experience in those grades, like I think it really ties in to those like higher math functions as you increase in grade level, because I can remember from 4th to 3rd grade level, completely different math. I think I failed math that year in 4th grade, to be honest. Like, even though like I'm a STEM person, I love math, but I know like different grade levels require different kinds of math and like math practices. So I really liked how, especially in this presentation, how you emphasized about your guys' plans and increasing math function, because I wanted to point out, I suppose, in the secondary school and high school, exams like the SAT, and I suppose in iReady I saw it as well. For the SAT, I guess especially because it's happening right now for Zebrado and Live Oak, I took many practice SATs, and I took an SAT before the one that happened this month, and I could almost verily say that anybody who had not taken like an AP calculus course would not get a very high score on that test, because with how math was taught for like the grade levels right now in the past, you weren't taught math enough to be able to do those kind of math problems without already being inherently good at math. Because all the kids who got high scores in math for SAT, they all were already really good at math. They could just do it in their head, or they already had some kind of talent for it. But for the kids who weren't as talented in math and were more reliant on their already knowledge, I feel like that is not fair for those students, because for the SAT, you should be able, with your knowledge that was taught by school, to be able to do that SAT and should expect a good score. I feel like it's not fair for kids who aren't already adept at math to be able to, they have to do extra hours of like studying or do these extra programs just to catch up for what the SAT or other kind of tests like that require from you, or like AP exams as well. I feel like school should be able to teach you how to do that higher math function, which I really appreciate you guys starting from such a low grade level to be able to be accustomed to that kind of standard of math that's growing, instead of just teaching like what's maybe fun or like the activities that are like not reaching that level, and just kind of filtering out those kids who are already good at math. They'll exceed and like get these high scores and go to these amazing colleges because they like their scores. And the kids who aren't as good as math, who are more reliant on the school and what they teach them, that they don't get as high scores and they think, oh, I'm not good at math, or I'm not as good as these guys, so obviously I'm not good at math, or something like that. I feel like school should be more accountable on what they teach to their kids on subjects like math, because technology is the future. Math is super important. Kids need to know that and stuff like that. So yeah.
And actually, what you're highlighting is part of the reason why California Education Partners has this grant work that they're doing, is that they've noticed that the way that math has traditionally been taught is very superficial understanding, and it's enough to get you through that week's test or that unit's test, but it's not a really deep understanding of how mathematics works. And so that is what we're trying to bring into the classrooms at the earlier grades, is having that deep understanding of like math as a language and how math works.
Yeah, and so it's like, but thinking back onto what I was thinking before, early in the presentation, back to the English, I guess I kind of wanted to point out as well, I guess this also affects math, but I do I can kind of link with those patterns between 5th to 6th grade level and 8th to 9th. I really like how the data reflects those kind of changes, because it really shows the factors that play in besides just straight education in the classroom. Other roles like family dynamic or physical changes to children, or social changes and social dynamics, those change between elementary to middle and then middle to high school. And so I think that data can be really valuable, and how other factors aside from what's taught in the classroom can affect these scores. Because there's no reason why from 5th to 6th grade level, there's this big drop compared to any other kind of grade level like that, aside from those kind of factors.
Any other comments, questions?
Staff,
And we're done. I'm just kidding.
thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Oh, we're not done. Sorry. Oh, good.
There's more to
There will.
So here's our MHUSD CASP math growth. We saw these people for our ELA, and here's the impact of our actions in math. So 4 out of our 6 elementary schools grew, 2 out of 2 of our K-8s grew in math, 2 out of 2 of our middle schools, 2 out of 3 of our high schools, all 13 we saw in those circle diagrams of our student groups grew. And 6 out of our 7 grades grew in math. Next slide. And then again, here's our iReady cohorts. So, seen that data? Yeah, next slide. And then our dual immersion data in math. Again, remembering this is a small group of students that's taking them. Yes, they're growing, they're doing well, but it is that small group. So, next slide. So, and then some more of our actions and impacts, or just kind of bring this back together. Our P3 work that we're doing, those counting collections. We're creating a comprehensive plan for math that's in our timeline, trying to figure out how we can do this. We know that the early work is important, but we can't forget that we also have high schoolers that need to pass IM1 and IM2 and 3 to graduate. So what are we doing? We're doing that beginning work, but also looking forward, how can we support all of our students? Next slide.
Our team calls this the scary Venn diagram. But this is a diagram that basically talks, on one side you have all the math practices, right? The science and engineering practices and the ELA. And what you see is in the gray in the middle about building strong base of knowledge through content-rich text, right? So you see the word operative, as Storm in the sentence said, is the weave, right? Is that focus that we had, we started that conversation early on about language and literacy and structured talk, right? Which supports all of these content areas, which is really important to the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. Okay, before I turn it over to Crystal, who's going to talk to that, I really want to commend our superintendent, right? Because yours truly and a couple of other folks said, hey, we have this grant for the California Ed Partners, right? And so she encouraged us to apply. So I want to make sure she gets the credit for kind of setting the vision of where we're going to make sure we have structured support with mathematics across the district.
All right, so science, as I mentioned earlier, our students take the statewide CAST assessment, and this is really just our 5th, 8th, and for us, it's our 11th graders in high school. And so they are tested in the following 3 areas: life sciences, physical sciences, and then earth and space sciences. And if you could go to the next slide. So these are our results for our CAST across our overall that you see there at 32.8. So we dipped a little bit by 1.2%. And then we also broke it down by grade level. So we have our 5th grade at 31%, our 8th grade scored about 28.8, and then our 11th graders scored at a clip of about almost 38%. Across our grade level, and so across our district. And so as Dr. Jimenez just mentioned, right, it's the work is multi-layered. So we started with ELA, we're now working on bringing in our math. And so the next step naturally is really to start looking at what PD we can start providing to start supporting the NGSS work, and to start really focusing on science. And so that's more to come on that, but we're certainly taking a look at this data. Next slide. We're going to go ahead and skip this slide. And so student preparedness. And so this is really where we're going to start to see, what some folks like to refer to as a return on investment, or other sort of typical terms that are thrown around in sort of the private business world, but we're in education here. So we're going to look at what our students are doing once they leave high school. So this is a look at our high school graduation rates over the last 5 years. And each line represents a different student group. And so if we just briefly look at our student groups, since 2020-21, our students with disabilities, these are increases in graduation rate, 11.5% increase. Our English learners we've increased that graduation rate by 13.6%. Our homeless youth by 11.7%. Our Latino students by 6.4%. And even our white students by 7.2%, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged by 8%. And really, the investment there is all the work that's taking place at the sites, from our teachers, right, from their professional learning communities to our academic counselors, to the additional periods in school that are providing opportunities for our students to be able to recover credits, but also accelerate, whether it's AP, CTE, et cetera. So if we could go to the next slide. This is looking at our CTE completers. And I will remind you that in order to complete a CTE pathway, for us, it's usually a 2-year pathway, right? You take a course their first year, and then the capstone course the second year. Some of our pathways are 3-year pathways, but in order for a student to be considered a completer, they do have to complete that particular pathway. And so what you see there is the uptick in our students that are in 10th through 12th grade that are completing a CTE pathway during their time in high school. And so over the past, since 21-22, we've seen 124% increase in the number of CTE completers in our high schools. And this is really giving our students an opportunity to experience, work-based learning while they're still in high school. They're getting hands-on. They're hearing from our industry experts that are in our community, and whether that's, whether their path is post-secondary, into a university or a career, it's experience that they're earning, and knowledge that they're gaining. Part of this is also, we've been able to blend 2 different programs, dual enrollment and CTE. And so what we've listed there are just a handful of the classes through dual enrollment that are also supporting our CTE programming. So ceramics, construction management, through CJ at Live Oak. Our digital media, that's a new class to Live Oak that's dual enrollment, but it's also a CTE course. And so it's the blending of the 2 programs that has also, students have always been interested in CTE, but bringing in these programs has heightened that interest we're seeing. Next slide, please. And so in terms of advanced placement, what you see here is a look at the number of students that have been enrolled or taking AP courses since 1920, along with the pass rate. And what you'll find is that the number of students that have taken advanced placement courses has increased, and the pass rate has increased as well. And so that's a huge, kudos, huge lift to our AP teachers. In terms of investments, right, we're talking professional development that they have attended through the College Board. We're talking, our academic counselors that are also encouraging our students. AP Capstone Diploma was a program. This is now in its 3rd year with our district. And then also, Equal Opportunity Schools is a partnership that we've had with our district for a number of years now. And what they do is help identify students that could potentially take AP classes, in particular students that come from underrepresented backgrounds. And that's super important because research tells us that if a student takes just 1 AP class in high school, the odds of them doing well in their post-secondary life shoots up, right? There's something, and we've talked about rigor all night, there's something to being exposed to that rigor. And so the data on advanced placement, and even dual enrollment for that matter, it's rigor that they're being exposed to, is key, especially in our student outcomes. Next slide, please. And so this is just a look at our dual enrollment. We have doubled the number of students in dual enrollment from this year to last year. And so you'll see the breakdowns by semester there. And so I like to say that we're in the toddler stage of this program, and so the hope is to obviously grow this into a nice, healthy adult across both high schools and get the 1,000 students that Dr. Garcia wants. Well,
So greedy.
next slide, please. And so the work that I just mentioned earlier with EOS, with our AP teachers, our administrators, our counselors, our high schools were just recognized by the College Board for this work. And so we have Sobrato, who received gold, and Live Oak, who received bronze, looking at 3 categories that are outlined on the slide, college culture, college credit, and college optimization. And really, it's looking at the percentage of students that are graduating from high school that took an AP test because of the importance that I just mentioned. Students that not only took the AP test, but earned a 3 or higher on the test, so they received potentially college credit for that. And then the percentage of students who took 5 or more AP classes, because there's additional research that signifies student success in the later years based on that. And then, as you recall, it was recently that Sobrato and Live Oak introduced AP at the 9th grade level through AP Human Geography, and so that has also had an impact on students dabbling, for lack of a better term, in AP coursework earlier and finding success and then sort of taking off from there. Next slide. And so part of that is also the AP Access Award. They are, this is an honor for high schools that are really encouraging students that come from those underrepresented backgrounds to take these rigorous classes and do well. And so, like our SED students, and we've seen the success right across our student groups. When we look at our SED students, how they're doing, they grew in ELA, they grew in math, their graduation rates have bumped up by like 8%. So this is where we're starting to see the impact in our student groups. Yes.
Trustee Patterson, please.
I just want to point out 5 AP
Classes is over 4 years.
Yes.
Not 5 AP classes senior year.
Correct.
Right.
Although that happens quite frequently.
I know people do it, but I don't know that it's recommended.
Yeah.
And also, am I the only one that noticed that AP insignia looks like an acorn? Because it looks like an acorn, right? But I think it's a torch.
Yeah.
Is it an acorn or a torch?
It's a torch.
It's a torch, right? It's an
But it looks,
acorn. Crazy.
It's a torched acorn.
Please go on.
All right, next slide, please. All right, and so return on investment, Amplify. We've heard really good things about Amplify. We've got about 960 students participating, which is what we had last year. We need students to be in school to be able to reap the rewards, right, of what we're doing, what our teachers are doing in the classroom. And so of the students that participated in Amplify, the year before last and last year, 61% of those students, or 465 students, improved their attendance from one year to the next. And then we have the breakdown there. I stopped at 10%. We had some students that had 20 to 30%, 20 or 30% improvement from one year to the other. But I think that, first and foremost, we need students in the classroom to be able to see this impact. And I think I'm going to hand it off here.
All right, so this is something that I'm very excited about, and Dr. O'Brien and I are collaborating on inclusive practices in our district. And so the first step that we've taken is around this inclusive practices roadmap, where Dr. O'Brien and I have gone on a little bit of a road show, and we went to go visit DLAC, and we spent some time with the group formerly known as SEAC. They are changing their name, so we'll let you know. But it's a parent representative from each school that comes together, and those parents have students with IEPs. And we also went to the two most recent roundtable meetings, and we met with administrators. And the purpose of all of these visits was for us to start talking to our educational partners around what is our vision for inclusion in Morgan Hill, what kinds of words and language would we like to see in an inclusive vision for Morgan Hill, and then also what kinds of actions would our educational partners like to see as an implementation of inclusion. So we're starting that conversation, and we're actually going to be looking to partner with Supporting Inclusive Practices, which is an organization that works with the California Department of Education on bringing inclusive practices into schools. And so they're going to support us with our roadmap work. We also have ongoing professional development on the Universal Design for Learning, and that is in partnership with the Inclusion Collaborative through the Santa Clara County Office of Education. They are also helping us with providing some professional development for our secondary co-teachers. And during the October PD Day, the teachers had an opportunity to come with their co-teachers to receive training on the different types of co-teaching models to further their understanding of what that could look like for our secondary students. And then they are also providing ongoing professional development through the California Coalition for Inclusive Learning for our teachers at El Toro and Nordstrom to expand their understanding of inclusive practices in elementary school. Next slide, please.
All right, we're almost at the tail end. I would be remiss if I didn't go back to the triangle to talk about the academics and also the work that has been going on in our district, right, regarding climate and culture, and that work that continues with our sites on PBIS and those tier one behavior strategies for all of our students. Next slide. I would also be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the professional learning that our administrators have been engaging in, right? And so part of our journey last year, as I started this conversation with you tonight, was to talk about student engagement, right? And so we've taken a lot of time for professional development for administrators to go kind of learn together and to calibrate what is student learning and engagement and what would that look like in our classrooms, what does it sound like. And so when we began our leadership huddle, is what we call it, right? Our professional development for administrators. We had in-depth conversations about that, and out of that grew this form or this way for us to calibrate and be in sync and kind of reading from the same sheet of music of what student engagement or some of the key concepts about student engagement. A big shout out to all of our administrators because I did not put this together. Our wonderful team from Sobrato began that conversation, had a wonderful draft, shared it with the team, and then we have a group of administrators, Mr. Asen, Ms. Garner Green, and Frankie as well from Sobrato, who came together, and they're called the Instructional Walkthrough Design Team. And so they have been instrumental in putting this together and sharing with the rest of our administrative team so that we can then address and respond to students' needs in regards to student engagement. So a lot of work behind the scenes for everybody, right, who has an influence and a sphere of influence in supporting our students.
And with all of our talk about Strong Start and early learning, we cannot leave out our TK classes. So last year, a group of administrators and teachers participated in some early learning work with the County Office of Education and had the opportunity to visit some institutes of higher education, programs that serve students ages 3 to 5. And we had a chance to go learn how they offer programming to students, because starting next year, our TKs will be open to all 4-year-olds. And that team of teachers, in addition to some other representatives, are working together this year to come up with a roadmap for what will TK look like in Morgan Hill. And we will be visiting some of our different educational partner groups to get their input on that as well. Next slide, please.
This is us together. So if you can click the next slide. You've seen some of these things as we've weaved them across, hopefully tonight as we talk about our next steps. I want to highlight one of the things that I shared with DLAC, which is also in our LCAP, is one of the things that we know is we have to develop some courses for secondary for our long-term English learners and addressing that need. So that is work that's coming up. And so you'll see some of the key steps that are heavy lifts for the organization. And I know I've said that repeatedly tonight, but the work is not done by just one one team or one department. This is an entire lift from every single teacher, every single member of those groups that we talked about, from the dual language immersion committee, right, to the secondary and elementary curriculum council. We're very grateful for the lift in ensuring that all boats rise when we work together. And now that's it.
Oh, that's it. Well, thank you very much. Questions, comments, Trustee Horner?
A quick one, maybe silly, but when we offer to all 4-year-olds, can we just go back to calling it pre-K? TK was a strange California invention to describe old 4-year-olds. So maybe we can just go back to pre-K.
Well, to make it more confusing, they're calling it UPK and UTK. So Universal Pre-Kindergarten and Universal Transitional Kindergarten.
Are those different things?
Not in our system, but they're using both names.
What's the rationale for that, by the way?
Officially, UPK would include our preschool providers, so we will be talking with Catalyst to inform how that informs our pipeline, but that's part of the reason why they're using them interchangeably, is like whether or not they're including the preschool partners. And then there's also some talk with the P3, instead of being preschool to 3rd grade, is like prenatal to 3rd grade. So there's a lot of ambiguity with the labeling for before kindergarten.
Gotcha. Student Board Member Faruqi, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to highlight, actually, I've seen my own eyes in my high school experience, the impact that AP classes have had on students. I have this one particular example of a student in mind where his background is very similar to what has been described in this presentation, where he comes from an immigrant family and he has his own kind of background and such. And he took, I believe freshman and sophomore year, he didn't take any AP classes. And then junior year, he decided, okay, I'm going to take AP language and composition. And that kind of class, it's rigorous, where it's like, you have to work for that A. It's not like, oh, I just did the work and like turn my assignments and I'll get an A. Like, you have to work for that A or else you'll get a B or C. And so he never took an AP class before. And I know in the beginning, I think he doubted himself because, in that class, it was in my class, and there's a lot of smart students in there, and medium students, and students who thought they were more on the lower level. And I think during that year, I could see progress and how he helped his self-confidence in himself when it came to academics. Where at first he was doubting himself, oh, I don't want to be against the smart people, or hey, you're the smart person in my group, I'm relying on you, stuff like that. And then at the end of the year, he ended up getting an A, and the smart person in his group did not. He put in a lot of work in that class, and he tried his best, and he got that A. And it's not easy to get an A in that class. And I could feel I don't think he knows, but I'm very proud of him, because I felt that was such an amazing arc. It was so much character development where he went through this rigorous class, and at first he didn't believe himself, and now at the end of the class, he realized that I'm on the same level. I have the potential. If I just work and just try my best, I can be as these smart kids. I can be these smart kids. And now in this, in 12th grade, he takes a lot of AP classes. He's taking, I don't want to say any specific classes, but he is taking more AP classes that he probably would not have thought to take before he took that particular AP class in his 11th grade. And so I just want to highlight that the impact of AP classes do have an actual effect on these students, and especially on their ability to perceive their academic prowess. And now he's talking about college and what he's going to major in and stuff like that. And it's just because of that self-confidence that AP, trying in AP classes does for students.
Thank you so much. And in fact, it occurred to me that, back to your earlier point about surveying students, that's one particular student that really we ought to sit down with and have a conversation, because I suspect that there's a number of other students in similar situations that we're not aware of, and the value that they have from their perspective is just unlimited. So thank you for that. Colleagues, any other questions, comments?
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, colleagues, we have 3 more items. 2 of those items will be really quick. The other one will be a little bit longer. What I suggest is that we take a break for about 7 minutes. We can either do that now, or we can do it after the next 2 items, which will be very quick. What do you wish? Or I can make the decision.
You're the board president, go for it.
All right, so I suggest we do the next 2 items. That we do the next 2 items now, and then after that, we'll take a 7-minute break. Okay? So, that means I need to do something here. So, Assistant Superintendent Chang will introduce and present this item. It's to approve resolution updating Office of Public School Construction, OPSC, signing authority. Assistant Superintendent Chang, please.
Thank you, President Escoto. For this item, the administration is requesting board approval to update the authorized signer for the district with the Office of School Public Construction, or Public School Construction, I'd rather say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Motion to approve the updating Office of Public School Construction signing authority.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Montes and Trustee Patterson. Student Board Member Faruqi, how do you vote?
Aye.
Colleagues, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. H3, adopt resolution for California Schools Voluntary Employee Benefits Association, VEBA.
I didn't survive.
Participation. Assistant Superintendent Chang will introduce and present this item.
Thank you again, President Escoto. For this item, the administration is also requesting approval of the participation agreement and resolution with BEBA in order to provide our employees with a less costly option for health and welfare benefit. As you may have heard earlier from Mr. Jim Levis, we're facing about an 82% increase in our current plan. So this is a much needed relief, and we're fortunate to be able to have this option for our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Chang. We'll now move to approve this resolution. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt the resolution for California School Voluntary Employees Benefits Association participation.
Thank you, Vice President Altman. Do I have a second?
With gratitude to all the folks who worked to make this happen as swiftly as possible after that gut punch from Aetna, I would like to second that motion.
Thank you, Trustee Patterson. Sorry. Student Board Member Faruqi, how do you vote?
Aye.
Colleagues, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We'll now take a 7-minute break.
Save myself.
Jim, did we leave up the rest of the
Absolutely.
Consideration of a resolution to censure trustee Pamela Gardner. Censure is a formal action by a majority of a governing body to declare its disapproval or condemnation of a particular conduct of one of its members. There's no express authorization in law for censure. Rather, it exists by custom and practice. No formal penalty or adverse consequence results from censure. Other than that, the member's conduct and the board's disapproval of it is made a matter of public record. The customary procedure is for the board to review information presented in support of the censure of the board member in the form of a resolution. Action to censure a board member must be initiated by motion and seconded, discussed, and voted upon by the entire board membership, including the member who's the subject of the resolution. The board may not act to adopt a resolution as written. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, it's not clear what you're saying. The board may act. Yeah. The board may act to adopt a resolution as written, amend the resolution, or decline to adopt the resolution or defer the matter to a subsequent meeting. My motion to censure Trustee Gardner and proposed resolution was part of the board's packet of information in preparation for today's meeting. Next, there are any comments by the public on this matter? If so, the public will have established amount of time, generally 3 minutes, to make a statement before the board considers resolution. If attorney or other representatives wants to speak on behalf of Trustee Gardner, indicate that the representative will have an opportunity to speak to the board during the debate portion of the proceeding when the board member requests to have the floor. In conferring with Trustee Gardner, rather than having an attorney present, she will subsequently be reading a statement. The motion is now before the board, but before I ask that there be a second, I'd like to open up this for discussion amongst the board, including Trustee Gardner or her representative, who shall provide the opportunity to make a statement to explain her actions before a vote is taken. If there's any discussion by the board members with regards to this item, Trustee Gardner will have a reasonable amount of time to speak in her defense. So we have public comment. We have 4, I thought we had an extra one. Excuse me, everyone. There we go. So we got Pamela. Okay. So the first speaker on public comment, we will have Pamela Meador.
She's now on Zoom.
She's on Zoom?
Yeah, but I think the first one is Armando.
I'm sorry.
Mr. President, could I inquire how many public comments we have? I'm just wondering. 4, okay.
We
Just
have
wondering
4.
about if we have to extend our meeting.
4 public comments. So the first one is Armando Benavides.
Good evening, board members. I want to say I support the censure motion and request that all of you to approve it. Trustee Gardner's visit to the ethnic studies class should have been to support, encourage, and engage with the students. Instead, it was marked by a lack of professionalism and respect. The trustee's verbal comments towards the students' project was not only inappropriate, but also undermined the hard work and dedication for those students, senior students the work that they put into their assignments. Taking pictures of students' work without permission was a blatant violation of privacy and trust. These students deserve an environment where they felt safe to express themselves and to express their identities to their projects. Instead, they were met by scrutiny and lack of respect. It is crucial for those in leadership positions to foster an atmosphere of encouragement and respect. Students should be made to feel empowered, not belittled or intimidated. The ethics studies class is important because it encourages understanding and appreciation of diverse cultures and provides an opportunity for students to learn about their cultures, struggles, and contributions to the U.S. society of the historically marginalized people. The trustee's actions diminish its value. I believe her actions not only compromise the educational environment, but also send a harmful message about inclusivity, diversity, and respect, and weakens the commitment of the district to adhere to those values. Trustees have a responsibility to encourage dialogue and understanding. The actions of Trustee Gardner that make students feel scared and upsets contradicts the very principles we strive to instill in our schools. By censure, this board is reaffirming its commitment to provide a safe and supportive learning environment for all students, district personnel, and especially our ethnic studies teachers. I urge you to approve this motion to ensure our schools remain spaces where every student feels valued and respected. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathy. I'm sorry. You have a list over there. Our next speaker is Robert Aguirre. Welcome, Robert.
Good evening. So I asked the board be equal in what you vote for. And I noticed that Wendy Sullivan in 2020 had action that she took and you guys found her guilty and you guys did not censor her. Okay? So we need to apply all of that across the board equally, first of all. Second of all, I noticed in your resolution you have training that you recommend. And I don't know if trustees normally attend training. It appears maybe you don't. But I would recommend that training be still attended by Pamela and by any new trustees in the future as just a matter of taking the position so that you don't find yourself in this position again. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Pamela Meador, who I believe is on Zoom. Pamela, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and can you hear me?
We can hear you, Pamela. If you could speak just a little bit louder, if we can
Okay.
increase.
Okay, I'll try and increase the volume on my phone. Let's see what we can do. Okay, is
Go
that
ahead.
better? Okay, fantastic. I'm here to address the proposed censure of Pamela Gardner. I find it curious that 14 days, 2 weeks before one of the most contested elections in my lifetime, that the school board would take this moment in time to censure a fellow trustee. It smacks as partisan politics aimed at trying to win at any cost, weaponizing your office. Unable to win on the battlefield of ideas, you are abusing what power you do have in some way to discredit not only Pamela Gardner, but your opposition. People may bring up Wendy Sullivan from 2020, where her missteps were highly egregious, but sitting members of this board felt it did not rise to the level of censure. This is repeatedly pressuring a student to overturn an election in favor of her daughter. As I recall, she aligned with Horner and Escoto and received political contributions from one or both of them for her failed bid at re-election. But Pamela, her crime was asking questions and making students feel uncomfortable. Frankly, I feel she did a great service to those children. We do them no favors by elevating their feelings above reality. We live in a rough and tumble world. They need to get a helmet. To Sarah, I say, you don't know what you don't know. You know what you've been told, but is it real? Right now, you have a broad base of support, and we are all looking for good things to come from you on this board. Don't jeopardize your support by aligning yourself with anyone. My advice to you is to abstain. Mary, we have had great conversations about being able to disagree without being disagreeable. We are more alike than we are different. We all need to look for common ground. Don't hand your political opponents this issue to run strong and toward the finish line. I see no benefit for you to align yourself with this political tar and feathering. Ivan, do you really want one of your last decisions that you make on this board to be clouded and tainted with overreach of power and political shenanigans? Nancy, be the voice of reason that you so often are and condemn this blatant abuse of power. Escoto, do you really think that you are this grand puppet master that through the power of your presidency hand out executive mandates, picking and choosing based on a political bias or party? This being the last item on the agenda was a direct manipulation to silent public comment. Horner, shame on you for your rhetoric through this campaign. These positions are nonpartisan. We come here to make the difficult decisions, but we come from different lenses. But the main focus needs to be that all our third graders can read when they graduate. Oh, and by the way, your support of the closet MAGA comment, I would think you of all people would be in favor of everyone coming out of the closet and being embraced by their community regardless. Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is Kat Napoli.
Good evening. I am very discouraged to have to come and talk to you because, as I've shared with you in the past, I go to third grade classes to make sure that our students learn the facts, not political, but the facts. Native Americans have been here for over 12,000 years. The Spanish came in 1769, so all of you are fairly recent immigrants. It is important for us to know the history and to share the history to our young students. And whether they're in high school or in third grade, it is important to respect them and their work. As an elementary school teacher, as a volunteer in Morgan Hill for many, many years, for over 45 years of volunteerism, it is really important to learn the facts. And when a student is questioned on whether they love their country, let me tell you some facts. Native Americans have served in the armed forces. Latinos have served in the armed forces and risked their life. I'll give you a name so that you can check it. Leonard Lowry, one of the most decorated soldiers of Native American descent in World War II. I'll give you another fact. My two brothers who were wounded in Vietnam, they risked their lives for this country. So if you ask students, do you love your country? Yes, they have been taught to love their country, despite the challenges of not being seen sometimes, of their value unrecognized. Despite that, Latinos and Native Americans and many people of color have fought for this country. So when you ask that question of high school students who don't know all of the facts and don't have a way to defend themselves because they still are young, an adult plays an unfair advantage when they do that. So I would ask you, and I would ask the union, to remember, as a former teacher, what is the union doing to protect the rights of teachers in their classrooms, to teach children to think for themselves, not to be indoctrinated by other people? And that's part of how they succeed, to learn how to think for themselves. But when you go in there as adult figures, you're intimidating them and you're stifling that ability to think. We have a student here, sitting here, who has many great thoughts, and she is reflecting the thoughts of those almost 8,000 students. No one trustee has a right to go in and put their own thoughts or their own opinions against students. None of you do. That's your duty. You swore to do that. And you knew this was a community of color. So be aware of that, educate yourself, and I think it is important. Take classes so that you learn how to be accepting of all people.
Thank you. I now am going to read the resolution censuring of governing board member Pamela Gardner. Whereas Pamela Gardner has been a member of the Board of Trustees of the Morgan Hill Unified School District since November 2022, and whereas Trustee Gardner visited an ethnic studies classroom at Ann Sobrato High School on April 26, 2024, and whereas the district received a complaint regarding Trustee Gardner's alleged interactions with district students during her above referenced classroom visit, and whereas the district enlisted the services of an outside investigator, Marcel Ionis, of the Office of County Counsel for Santa Clara County, to investigate Trustee Gardner's alleged conduct pursuant to the district's uniform complaint procedures, District Board Policy and Administrative Regulation 1312.3. And whereas, based on the investigation, Mr. Ionis made the following findings, facts, and conclusions, which the district has adopted as its own. Number one, Trustee Gardner repeatedly interrupted students whom she interacted with during her classroom visit on April 26, 2024. Number two, Trustee Gardner questioned whether students were learning anything good about America. Number three, Trustee Gardner questioned whether students love their country. Number four, students in the class were scared, visibly upset, emotional after their interactions with Trustee Gardner. And number five, Trustee Gardner took pictures of the students' projects and the work from the ethnic studies class and other classes, and then shared those pictures with community members. And whereas California Education Code sections 200 and 220 prohibit discrimination in public schools on the basis of numerous protected characteristics, and whereas the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, and corresponding sections of the California Education Code governing student records prohibit the dissemination of student records without parental consent, and whereas board policy and NAR 3131.2 prohibit the bullying of students, of district students, and whereas board bylaws 9000 provides that the board shall ensure that the district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of the community. And whereas board policy 9005 provides that the governing board believes that its primary responsibility is to act in the best interest of every student in the district. The board also has major commitments to parent, guardians, and all members of the community, employees, the state of California, and laws pertaining to the public education, and establish policies of the district. To maximize board effectiveness and public confidence in district governance, board members are expected to govern responsibly and hold themselves to the highest standard of ethical conduct. And whereas board policy 9005 further provides norms and standards for board members, including but not limited to the following: treat each other with respect, being kind, cordial, and listening to each other. Understand and respect each other's perspective, values, beliefs, experience, and styles. Focus on student learning and achievement. Maintain confidentiality. Represent our district well. Be an advocate for students in public education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby censures Trustee Pamela Gardner for conduct inimical to the interests of the Morgan Hill Unified School District, its students, staff, community, and the Board of Education. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education encourages Trustee Gardner to attend trainings on student privacy rights under FERPA, corresponding California laws, as well as on establishing appropriate boundaries when interacting with district students, as well as new trustee and relevant masters in governance trainings offered by the California School Boards Association. Be it further resolved that Trustee Gardner is expected to follow the district classroom visitation policy memorized in Board Policy 1250-E, passed and adopted on this
22nd day of October 2024 at a duly noted meeting at the Morgan Hill Unified School District Board of Education by the following vote. Before I ask for a second and take the vote, I'm now going to open up the discussion for the board. I also want to let you know that our attorney that worked on this particular matter is present and available to answer any questions. That is Josh Stevens, who's right over there. But before my colleagues, before you make any statements, if you choose to do so, and by the way, you don't have to make a statement. But before we do all that, I'm going to hand it over to Trustee I'm sorry. Thank you. We need to, colleagues, I'm sorry, we need to extend the meeting beyond 10:30. May I have a motion?
Motion to extend the meeting to 10:45.
May I have a second?
Second. Second, Mr.
Second, thank you. Did you get those, Kelly? All right. I don't know if our student board member is going to vote on, can she extend?
Yes.
Vote on the extension? Student board member, how do you vote?
Aye.
Colleagues, all those in favor of extending our meeting until 10:45, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. So again, colleagues, before I open it up for discussion, questions, comments, going to give Trustee Gardner an opportunity to read a statement.
Thank you, President Escoto. And just for the record, I wasn't aware of how this was going to proceed until just 6 minutes ago when you and I talked right now. So my attorney and I, in collaboration, wrote a statement, and this is what I'd like to share. President Escoto and colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to comment on Mr. Marcelo Quinones' report. And what a report it is. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. I have spent almost 2 years of my life endeavoring to uphold campaign promises made to my constituents to effect transparency at the district level. I've engaged in conversations to hear discussions and various viewpoints in an effort to resolve our issues and come together. But the orthodoxies and partisan politics that are more prevalent than I imagined, which is deeply disturbing to me because I think the polarization and divisions that exist are the worst things for our district's stakeholders, teachers, parents, and students. In reference to the ES coursework being developed at MHUSD, there are many, many more conversations that need to be had. Tonight is hopefully the beginning of a truly constructive journey. With reference to your motion to censor, there is a lot that could be said, though most of the conversation from my perspective and at this juncture would not be productive. I understand and respect your decision to censure and have no desire, nor is it my intention to participate in a point-by-point affirmation or rebuttal of the items listed in the report, other than to say it contains some truth, a plethora of assumptions, and a hearty dose of political bias. What I will say is, it is interesting to me that President Escoto claims that my actions, quote, may constitute violations of a whole bunch of things, yet when I and my counsel specifically asked counsel for the district what exactly was violated, we were provided no answers, other than broad allusions to laws that are hundreds of pages long. President Escoto's legal counsel cannot pinpoint a single thing that I violated and how I violated it. The truth is, if there was anything in my behavior that actually violated California or federal law, the district attorney or the Federal Department of Education would be at my doorstep questioning me. Furthermore, I find it disturbing that absent from President Escoto's letter, that's the most recent one I got, and absent from any of his preceding emails, was there any direction or explanation on due process. During my investigation or in the follow-up related to outside counsel's report, basically nothing was explained to me during this process. Colleagues, please do understand President Escoto did send me overly aggressive emails while giving me oddly contradictory instruction, but at no time did he ever provide procedural or substantive guidance. Any constructive instruction I received was shared with me by my own legal counsel, paid for with my own money. In closing, my earnest desire is this district will remember that public education is supposed to be nonpartisan. Taxpayers do not get to mark a box that says, I want my money to be spent on one side's partisan issues, ideologies, or biases. My commitment to our school community will remain to continue working towards taking national politics out of public education by focusing on nonpartisan instruction. Again, thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Trustee Gardner. Now I'm going to open it up to my colleagues for any comments, questions, and I'd like to ask Attorney Stevens to come on up and make himself available to answer any questions, clarify any of the items that have already been listed. Any comments? Trustee Montes.
Thank you, President Escoto. As a member of this governing board for the last 4 years, coming to the end of my term, I want to state the following. I fully support the adoption of the resolution that has been brought before the board to censure Trustee Gardner. By adopting this resolution, we take a significant step in upholding our shared expectations as school board members in accordance with our board bylaws, as well as reaffirm our commitment to the safety of our students and teachers, for that matter. I believe our students deserve a respectful and supportive environment that is essential. And it is essential that our actions as trustees reflect our commitment to fostering a positive classroom environment for all, and that we be held accountable when they don't.
Thank you, Trustee. Anyone else? Trustee Patterson.
President Escoto, thank you, Trustee Gardner, for your statement. And Trustee Rosales Montes, very well said. I would say two things. One, I don't know anything about a partisan nature of listening to the 800 employees that I am responsible for as a member of this board who are asking that an action be taken. There's nothing partisan about inquiring to students about their experiences in a classroom that is supposed to be a positive learning environment and safe. So I'm baffled about any references to partisanship. I've only really just heard about reading the lawyer's account and the allegations and the report back that I feel to hold myself accountable to the experiences and the desires, the wishes, and the aspirations of our students and our staff, that I would be supporting this resolution. I think also I appreciate the reference to training. We've been talking a bit about training. There is much training that's available to board members and highly encouraged. No out-of-pocket expenses are required by a board member. It starts within 30 days of your election, where there's a statewide conference and educational experience available, and a full day dedicated to new trustees everyone here but one of us, except Ms. Gaddis, has, I believe, embarked on that training immediately after being elected. Trustee Gardner did not do that. There have been 2 occasions since then where these trainings were offered, as well as not only within 1 month after being elected into office, then the subsequent year, but then all year long, there are trainings available and widely disseminated. And again, no out-of-pocket expenses for a trustee to go to be educated on their role as a trustee. So I highly encourage, I've encouraged Ms. Gaddis already, anyone, any new board members that take the role, that become elected the next month upon us. I've also spoken to almost all of the candidates to make sure their calendars are clear, December 4, 5, 6, because it comes up fast, and it's absolutely imperative that new board members attend that training immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Patterson. Anyone else wish to make a comment? All right.
Given that, I think the board president made the motion. May I second the motion? Is that an appropriate
Yes, you may.
time? Okay, then I second the motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to censure Trustee Gardner. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Montez?
I'm sorry, do you start with student board member? Do you want to?
No,
She can't.
student board member will not vote on
All right,
this.
thank you.
Aye.
She was looked ready.
Trustee Montez?
Aye.
Trustee Patterson?
Aye.
Trustee Northrop Gaddis? Aye. Trustee Altman?
Aye.
Trustee Escoto?
Aye.
Trustee Horner?
Aye.
And Trustee Gardner?
Oh, she isn't, okay.
She's done. All right. All right, motion passes. And that concludes this process. And may I now have a motion to adjourn? A second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, folks.
All those opposed can stay.